Stepping out of the tunnel, Cronus surveyed the scene before him. Liquid light cascaded from the sun, scattering across the heavens, the oceans, and the land. The Son of Chaos was not composed of mere fire, but existed in a state between solid and liquid, an ever-changing force of primordial energy. Like the distant stars of chaos, these celestial bodies were not merely luminous orbs, but contained star cores within. Many lacked their own guardian deities, their power left unchecked. As fragments of the sun descended upon the land, they distorted reality, creating unstable zones. Cronus observed some of this energy seeping into the fissures of the earth, transforming into molten magma and flowing into the depths of the underworld. There, it formed a lake of lava at the gates of the underworld, reminiscent of the Styx River, a natural barrier between life and death. Cronus let out a long sigh. His objective had been met. Hyperion had personally ensured the removal of the sun's core stars. However, the consequences of that victory now lay before him to manage. "Thea, my sister, I never wished for this outcome." He spoke softly, setting aside his thoughts on the sun's condition to address the goddess of light. The events had unfolded as they had. Hyperion's pride had dictated his choices. But the other ancient Titan gods would not perceive the situation so simply. A principal god had sacrificed his divine body, shaking the very foundation of his godhood. Should Cronus now force Thea into exile among the stars, the repercussions could be dire. He was uncertain what new conflicts such a move would spark. Perhaps nothing would happen. Perhaps everything would unravel. But Cronus had already secured his position. There was no need to invite further instability. Unlike her husband, Thea had never vied for the divine throne. She had remained distant from the great ambitions of Hyperion. As a deity, she lacked the hunger for power that consumed others. Had she not stood in opposition to him now, Cronus might have even preferred a cosmos governed by a ruler like her. "Spare me the theatrics, Cronus. You have won. What will you do with me? Cast me into the abyss." Her voice was cold, though Cronus knew her words were laced with bitterness rather than genuine fear. "You worry too much." He shook his head, recognizing that her resentment would not easily fade. And yet, she too must have known that he harbored no intention of harming her. His gaze flickered toward Selene, the goddess of the moon, and Eos, the goddess of dawn, who stood hesitantly nearby, watching the exchange unfold. With his decision made, Cronus finally spoke. "The regions around the sun have suffered, but the starry domains along the moon's orbit remain yours. You and your children will continue to reign over them." He let the words settle before adding, "I only ask, Thea, that you do not stand against me as Hyperion did." She smirked. "You should concern yourself with your unborn heirs, not me. I have no interest in your throne, but they may not share my indifference." Leaving him with those final words, the Mother of Light departed, taking her daughters with her toward the realm of the moon. Her son Helios, however, remained. The divine king knew the young god of the sun would still be needed to stabilize the celestial cycle. Moreover, given that Thea had permitted Hyperion to imprison him, Helios himself might be reluctant to follow her now. "Helios, how do you feel?" Cronus turned his gaze to the young deity, watching him intently. In the past, such an inquiry would have carried an edge of anxiety. But with the knowledge that his firstborn would be a goddess rather than a rival, Cronus found himself more at ease. Helios closed his eyes briefly, sensing the sun's chaotic energy before answering. "Your Majesty, my father's essence still lingers within the sun. I cannot say for certain whether I can fully control it." Cronus nodded. "I understand." His focus returned to the sun. Before he could restore its order, he needed to neutralize Hyperion's lingering influence. If Helios were to assume full command of the sun's divine authority, he first had to replace his father's presence entirely. And if the young deity ever grew too ambitious, Cronus could always release Hyperion and allow father and son to battle for dominance. But for now, Hyperion needed to be sealed away. "Hyperion, even now, you defy the natural order. As divine king, I pass judgment upon you." The authority of the divine king resonated with the codex of creation. Law, order, and dominion merged as Cronus's power surged, elevating him to a near-divine peak. The same threshold the Heavenly Father had once reached. Though where Uranus had dominion over the sky, Cronus lacked such cosmic authority. Yet it was enough. For imprisoning your fellow Titans, preventing them from fulfilling their divine roles, this is your first crime. For recklessly disturbing the balance of light and causing the stars to fall, this is your second crime. For your disrespect toward the divine king, your third crime is insubordination. His voice rang with unwavering finality as he cast his judgment. "By my authority as divine king, I hereby sentence you to eternal imprisonment." Chains of order materialized from the void, piercing through the blazing sun, binding Hyperion's essence within. Simultaneously, Cronus felt his divine strength diminish. Sealing away a true god demanded a constant expenditure of power. Approximately one-third of Hyperion's might was siphoned from him, now locked away to sustain the eternal prison. This was why Titans were cast into the abyss rather than merely sealed away in the heavens. In Tartarus, they were contained without continued divine cost. "It is done," Cronus declared, turning to Helios. "Your father has paid the price for his transgressions." The young sun god bowed low, reaffirming his loyalty to the divine king. The sheer magnitude of Cronus's power had left a deep impression on him. As a second-generation Titan who had never seen Uranus, Helios could barely comprehend the force he had just witnessed. "From this day forward, the sun will rise and set by your will, Helios. However, I sense its instability remains unresolved." Helios hesitated before admitting, "The sun remains turbulent. My father's influence has left it in disarray, and though he is sealed, my own strength is insufficient to stabilize it. I require your aid, your majesty." Cronus sighed, dissatisfied with Helios's limitations, but recognizing the necessity of action. If he could not restore the celestial balance, the starry domains he had secured would not yield their intended power to the divine throne. But there were solutions. If needed, he could extend the use of the Codex of Creation. With this artifact's power, Helios should be able to temporarily assume full control over the sun cycle. And with Hyperion suppression, the new god of sun would rapidly amass divine power. Still, Cronus thought to himself, it is best if the sun remains weaker. Casting a sidelong glance at the young deity, loyal, yet still marked by years of imprisonment, Cronus remained unmoved. A god's heart can change with power, and the divine king had no patience for uncertainty. The spirit realm, bathed in the glow of a high-hanging July moon, exuded a tranquil yet foreboding presence. Seated in the grand hall of the Temple of Lops, Laine leaned against the backrest of his chair, his gaze wandering to the vast expanse beyond. 3 days had passed since the celestial upheaval, and as he had anticipated, 2 figures had made their way into the underworld. Their journey had been marked by effortless destruction, wraiths falling like leaves in their wake. The creatures were not only weak, but also failed to meet the gods' aesthetic sensibilities. "Liana, I am here, your highness." The voice was smooth as silk, black hair cascading down like a waterfall. She had remained a constant presence through the centuries, her power expanding alongside the ever-growing underworld. "Cronus and Helios have entered the underworld. Go and welcome them on my behalf." Taking a measured sip of tea, he issued the order with indifference. "Yes, your highness." Liana bowed and departed swiftly. Soon after, Cronus was the first to step into the temple, Helios trailing behind. The newly anointed god of sun carried himself cautiously, more like an attendant than a deity. Apart from the goddess of law, they were the only 2 true gods to set foot in the spirit realm. An incarnation? It seems his divine majesty, the divine king, has misunderstood me, Laine remarked with an easy smile, noting that Cronus had not come in his true form. Not all gods could create incarnations, but Cronus was one who could. The spirit realm strengthens with time, and here, the power of the mortal realm is nearly nullified. I prefer caution, Cronus replied, settling into a chair. After all, just as with Mother Earth's life vase, one never knows what they might encounter here. Laine waved off the implied suspicion. Speaking of a life vase, have you ever wondered why the authority of life wasn't born into my hands despite my dominion over spirituality? Instead, it was bound to an artifact. Traditionally, Gaia had been the first primordial god, and the association with life was natural. But now, the narrative was different. I never understood before, but now I do. Just as almost all gods despise him, what he left me was only that which he could not take away. Instinct governs all things. The greatest good is him, and the greatest evil is also him. Or rather, it may be that terms such as good and evil fail to encompass him. Laine gestured to the table before him, inviting Helios to sit. The young god of sun hesitated, his presence faint, his demeanor burdened by years of confinement. Unlike other deities of his stature, he lacked the bearing of a celestial sovereign. The divine king, Mother Earth, the cosmic balance, such concerns were beyond him. Yet, today his fate hung on this meeting, so he had little choice but to listen. Perhaps so, Cronus conceded. Among chaos's gods, many seek to free themselves from him. Despite his curiosity, Cronus did not linger on the philosophical. His purpose was clear, and he would not delay. I do not know what past you share with Mother Earth and myself, but today I come for his sake. He turned to the god of sun beside him. I require a means for Helios to control the sun's movements. In exchange, I offer you dominion over the stellar regions along the sun's path, one of the richest domains in the cosmos. Cronus wasted no time. The sun, untethered and chaotic, radiated unchecked energy across the heavens. Even now, Rhea and the god of meteorology struggled to contain its devastation. Every passing moment made restoring order more difficult. A prime domain, yet also the most ravaged, Laine mused, cutting through the divine king's offer. The first thing Hyperion destroyed was the solar orbit. By now, that expanse is likely barren, which is precisely what you desire, isn't it? Cronus countered. With the obstructions cleared, you may reconstruct the domain as you see fit. Owning a world, you could grant territories to gods. Don't tell me you are incapable of this. Tension thickened in the chamber, but Laine had no inclination to press further. The vast cosmos held few truly valuable regions. This exchange would suffice. Let it be, Cronus, Laine remarked with a smile. As a divine king, you may be well suited. Unlike many deities, Cronus lacked excessive personal ambition. He pursued power, yes, but his actions remained measured. Among the chaotic pantheon, he was one of the more pragmatic rulers. I appreciate the compliment, though I'd appreciate it more if you hadn't made that prophecy, Cronus said, his expression softening. Laine merely chuckled. Prophecies do not dictate fate, only observe it. It is not my fault if one hears what they wish not to and blames the prophet. He set his cup down, the light sound resonating through the chamber. Now, then, Cronus, let us speak of the sun. How well do you understand divine artifacts? Cronus furrowed his brow. I know there are two types. Innate artifacts, akin to godhood itself, embody divine authority. Forged artifacts, though powerful, lack absolute dominion. Laine nodded. Correct, but incomplete. In truth, the gods have yet to master true artifact smithing. Even crafted artifacts may contain divine authority, if one possesses the right materials. Cronus remained silent, waiting for the true purpose behind these words. Moreover, through proper smithing, one can refine aspects of a god's authority, sacrificing certain powers to enhance others. And what are you proposing? Cronus asked, his gaze flickering toward Helios. Half of him, Laine replied, his tone as casual as if he were discussing a trade. I will suppress his light and heat attributes, channeling all divine strength into solar motion. He will move the celestial bodies with a mere fraction of his power, ensuring the sun's course is maintained. Laine's words sent a ripple of unease through Helios. If you doubt my intentions, You may observe the process yourself. Every ounce of solar source force will be accounted for. Cronus considered, will his divine power diminish? Marginally. As long as he wields the artifact, his limits will remain unchanged. However, his offensive might will be significantly reduced. Laine tilted his head slightly. But then, do you require Helios to be a war god? Cronus smirked. I suppose not. Right, Helios. The young deity clenches fists. His father, Hyperion, had imprisoned him, but the divine king, he sought only to reduce him to an instrument. A god could not be stripped of his authority against his will. Yet, before him stood the divine king, the sole force that could decide his fate. He could refuse. But then he thought of Hyperion, sealed powerless. Could he truly risk defying the divine king? After a long silence, Helios bowed his head. Yes, your majesty. I do not require such strength. I shall move the sun as you command.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
The party concerned has also agreed, so the matter was settled. Laine had intended to let the god king, who lacked experience, enjoy the catering services of the spirit realm. But Cronus, thinking of the constant crumbling of celestial bodies in the sky, regretfully declined his invitation. Thus, under Laine's leadership, the three made their way along the main road toward the Correct Shrine. Regarding the god of sun, Laine indeed had no better ideas, as in the original mythology, whether it was Helios or the disastrous Phaeton, or even Apollo, who was himself the god of light, all relied on the sun chariot to steer the sun. Instead of spending time and effort to come up with a better solution for him, it was more straightforward to craft a divine artifact, as in the mythologies. As for whether this would weaken the power of the god of sun, Laine was indifferent. Even without the god king's suggestion, he would at most not take action against the sun on his own, but he saw no need to speak for a deity he was not familiar with. Besides, although the god king acted for the sake of his control over the sun, he also inadvertently cleared obstacles for the god of stars under Laine's command. Since he was to be the sun's neighbor, those he couldn't fight were definitely preferable to those he could. Passing through several pavilions and heading west, the three finally arrived at the gates of a uniquely designed shrine. Unlike other temples, the Correct Shrine had no top, and merely approaching it, a soul-warming sensation of heat enveloped them. Is this the fire aura? Somewhat surprised, Cronus felt a peculiar sensation driven by the god king's power. Sensing the authority of fire, he had two conflicting intuitions. It was as if he felt both annoyance and pleasure. But overall, the pleasure outweighed the annoyance. Yes, as one of the most destructive aspects of godhood, I had planned to use it to nurture a high-grade artifact geared towards slaughter. However, unfortunately, even after thousands of years, it had yielded no results. So, I let it return to its essence, to burn here in the form of pure fire, while using its power to foster another artifact. Nodding, Laine was admittedly somewhat vexed. The nurturing of divine artifacts was very much about timing. Not to mention those nurtured by the world needed a suitable moment to emerge in perfect condition. Just as the Well of Origins was related to the creation of man, and the Codex of Creation to legislation. However, Laine really couldn't figure out how the artifact of fire would come into being and decided to use its essence for something else in the meantime. As for the artifact meant for battle, that required further deliberation, since the Silver Age was upon them, and, barring any surprises, Laine's divine power was poised to surge. The Hyperion he had once needed external forces to defeat might soon be no match for even one of his hands. His hypothetical enemies were gradually becoming the primordial gods, especially the enigmatic Dark Overlord. Although there were currently no signs of hostility between the two, being prepared or not made all the difference. And when facing great divine power, an ordinary high-grade artifact might not be ineffective, but its effectiveness was extremely limited. What a pity! Though proclaiming it a pity, Cronus harbored no regret whatsoever in his heart. He was well aware of the might of a battle-oriented high-grade artifact. Even though he had only experienced it once due to its effectiveness against specific targets, that memory still profoundly affected Cronus. Had it novel been at? Prepare yourself. Laine paid no heed to the God King's insincerity and took the lead in entering the gates of the shrine. Behind the door was a slanting conical pit leading downward. The bottom of the pit was hard to see clearly, and multicolored liquids flowed there, emitting auras of various emotions. Within the center, an invisible flame of changing colors burned fiercely, and an ancient, incomplete stone tablet fluctuated within the flames. Is this the civilization steel that the kings of humanity once saw? Observing carefully, trying to determine the authority of the tablet, Cronus found disappointingly that there seemed to be a barrier between him and the tablet, preventing him from discerning its power no matter what. However, he still took mental note, especially since, for some reason, the artifact was incomplete. Yes, the civilization steel. I'm currently using it to carry some humanistic aspects of godhood. With a gesture, the stone tablet quietly vanished. Laine turned to Helios, smiling as he said, "This is the place, separate half of the source power of your godhood, and I will handle the rest." All right. With gritted teeth, the young god of sun separated a golden entity from himself. That was Helios's son, not as fierce as Hyperion's, but gentler and more orderly. But no matter how gentle the sun was, its essential properties could not be changed. In the realm of battle, it was undoubtedly one of the top divine roles. Come! With an outstretched hand, golden source power fell into his palm. At the same time, dozens of different colored metals emerged from the void. Some originated from the underworld and others from the starry sky, treasures brought back by the true gods of the spirit realm in their daily exploits. Of course, such items were not considered rare for the gods. Contemplating the source power and materials before him, Laine thought for a moment. Shortly thereafter, he pointed, and the flames transformed instantly. "Refine," he commanded softly, and the golden source power was the first to merge into the invisible flames. A thin layer of liquid at the bottom surged up, and when it came into contact with the flames, the invisible blaze intensified slightly. The divine king and Helios, who were watching from the side, could feel that under the flames annealing, the nature of the golden source power was slowly changing. Source power was indestructible, the foundation of the world, the origin of authority, but its manifest nature could be altered. The wild, scorching parts associated with the sun itself were being continuously hidden within the inside, while the parts associated with celestial motion were annealed to the surface, expanding their significance. At the same time, the various metals around them also melted into a liquid, and under the residual heat of the light blaze, they reshaped their forms. I have two ideas. First, I could make it into a sun astrolabe. It would inherit the concept of the sun as the supreme body of material light and govern the sun's movement in the form of dominion. While continuing the crafting of the divine artifact, Laine inquired to the two clients. And the other option? Ignoring Helios's expectant gaze, Cronus asked directly. The divine king should dominate the starry sky through dominion, not necessarily the sun. The second option, I will make it into a sun chariot. Controlling this artifact will allow one to pull celestial bodies with ease. Moreover, if a suitable candidate is chosen, they could assist with driving the chariot, leaving the god of sun merely to steer. Calmly presenting the second option, Laine awaited the divine king's response. Then let's go with the second one. Controlling the sun is no easy task, and to avoid overexertion, I can have other deities assist with the god of sun's duties. Without hesitation, the divine king chose the second option, feeling that he had made the right choice. To give up just a few star realms, ones that originally belonged to others, but to gain far beyond his imagination. Good. Receiving the expected reply, Laine nodded and quickened his pace. As the days passed, Cronus had made it clear that he hoped Laine would complete the forging as quickly as possible. Therefore, with some compromise in power, Within just 3 months, the sun chariot was already taking shape. The sun was inherently a body of light and heat, but today I grant it fire. Looking at the nearly completed divine artifact, Laine declared calmly, "This is the warm, masculine, celestial fire, and likewise, it is the right to use fire that I bestow upon it." This task should have been completed by the future Hephaestus, but Laine did not mind continuing the process. From now on, solar golden flame would symbolize this artifact. Taken aback, Cronus did not understand why Laine had suddenly become so generous. But after sensing the sun fire that flared up on the divine chariot, he didn't dwell on it. The flame provided by Laine was not oriented towards destruction, but rather, it was teeming with life. This would help the growth of all things, but would not increase the artifact's power. Turning his attention back to the sun chariot, the nascent artifact was like a never-ending light source. Its frame, axle, and wheels shone like gold, spokes glittered like silver, and the bridle meant to restrain the beast was embedded with sparkling gemstones. "Excellent," he nodded with satisfaction before turning to the sunshine god behind him. "This is your future carriage. You will drive it for me, bringing light to all beings." The divine king was satisfied with the crafting of the sun chariot, but Cronus, concerned for the sun and the starry sky, hastened to leave. He needed to get this celestial body moving again as soon as possible. Every day of delay meant more destruction in the heavens, and the time needed for restoration would be more than 100-fold. "Aster, how are the preparations?" Watching Cronus's avatar and Helios depart from the spirit realm, Laine inquired softly. The star fields along the sun's path used to be continuous, without detailed division. "As you requested, I've divided the star fields the sun passes through into 12 equal parts based on the changes in its trajectory over the course of a year, corresponding with the 12 months when the starlight aligns with the land. One can even use calendars to influence the climate changes in the mortal realm." Clad in a silver gossamer gown, Aster, the weaver of stars, replied, "But there are not enough human heroic spirits to stabilize the star fields. If we can't calm the chaos in the starry sky by other means, relying solely on these heroic spirits, it would take more than 10,000 years to restore it to the original state. Maintaining and repairing were tasks of differing difficulty. Under normal circumstances, these heroic spirits of the golden humanity, with a starry power controlled by the god of stars, would suffice in stabilizing the star field energy, but the situation now was far from normal. "I understand," Laine said after rubbing his forehead, feeling somewhat helpless with the situation. He had not anticipated that Hyperion, in the end, would resort to it to prevent subordinates from being used by you. "I might as well kill them all" approach. The starry sky, unlike the land, was rife with storms and energy tides that ebbed and flowed. Without sufficient gods of stars, a single star field simply couldn't provide stable power to its master. Now Laine was faced with this very situation and needed to find a way to quell the turmoil. Of course, those eternally slumbering gods of stars were not exactly dead. If he was willing to have the spirit realm provide divine power, he could revive them. But Laine was not inclined to expend great effort just to save a group of temps. After all, the illusory stars he had created also numbered in the thousands, and once the starry sky stabilized, those gods of stars were not needed. To save them to use for 1,000 years and then bury them again. This was something Laine couldn't bring himself to do. But in the current system of the spirit realm, there was also no place for the external gods of stars. "Let's put it off for now," Laine eventually said. "Once Cronus has arranged the trajectories of the celestial bodies in the starry sky, the Codex of Creation will stay with you. Go find Themis in the starry sky, and with the Codex of Creation in her hands, its power is enough to quell the chaotic energy flows along the zodiac trajectory." After hesitating for a moment, Laine added another sentence. "Tell her, although it may take some time, after she helps with this, I will afterwards help her avoid an annoying fellow." "Yes, your highness." Though Aster did not know whom Laine was referring to, the angels of the spirit realm never questioned Laine's commands. So Aster nodded and flew towards the starry sky. The 12 gods of stars had already gone to their new domains. After all, a star field left unmanaged for even a day multiplied the difficulty of its subjugation. Though their divine power was far from enough to suppress a star field's energy, it was possible to manage. After a short while, only one person was left in the great hall. Laine gently tapped on the armrest, his gaze piercing through the void, through layers of barriers, vaguely discerning that figure chained within the sun by the locks of order. Even though he was sealed, the former god of the sun was still struggling ceaselessly. Although this would not break the seal, the divine king's power was nonetheless sapped a bit because of it. This was the god of sun, fervent and reckless. Hyperion, this is the second time he's fallen in my hands, Laine mused. While the second time was indeed orchestrated by the divine king, without Laine's assistance, he wouldn't have succeeded so effortlessly. Colliding with Laine twice, and each time ending up worse than before, this fellow truly suffered a share of hardship. Had it novel been at? But indeed, undying deities are quite troublesome. No matter how many times you defeat them, they always have the chance to come back, and even if sealed, they're constantly wearing down the sealer's power. Third time's the charm. You have one more chance to come out at the time of the divine king's succession. If you choose to leave or to take revenge on your firstborn, then our grievances can end there. But if you're unwilling to stop, gods are immortal, and the sun cannot be destroyed. So strictly speaking, Laine had no way of dealing with an ancient Titan god. However, with some past experiences, he faintly thought of some more interesting, yet more difficult methods of handling the situation. He couldn't do it now, but when the third era came, he could give it a try. The sun is eternal, deities never die, yet death is not solely the demise of the physical body. Your Majesty, do you really intend to hand over the zodiac domains to the Lord of the Spirit Realm? On the way back to Mount of the Gods, Helios ultimately couldn't hold his silence. The zodiac was how Laine referred to the sun's path through the stars over the course of a year during the process of forging the divine artifact. He called the sun's path the zodiac, and the moon's path the bypath, and generally, although they intersect at one point, the sun and the moon do not collide. Only on very rare occasions do their positions come dangerously close, and the divine king considered such a rare day a thank offering to the devourer of the sun. Although it lacked wisdom, the divine king remembered its merits, so on that day, he allowed eclipses to emerge and feast to its content, thereby also averting an imbalance of energy between the sun and the moon. After all, due to Laine's doing, the difference in power between the sun and the moon of this world was quite substantial, and if they were to intersect, something not so wonderful might occur. With Hyperion's control over the sun, there hadn't been any problems before, but the divine king had no hope that would be the case with Helios. Of course, if I don't do this, do you think he'd be interested in any other remote place? If you could operate the sun on your own, I wouldn't need to come here at all. Glancing indifferently at the god of sun, Cronus spoke directly. Your thoughts need to match your power, Helios. I know you're unhappy, but compared to your sister, at least you are a true god with strong godhood. If one day you become a god with formidable divine power, I will seriously consider your ideas. But for now, you just need to execute. If it were any other deity, Cronus would at least try to coerce or entice them. But for the god of sun, he didn't even entertain the thought of enticing him. The starry sky doesn't need so many voices, and coming up, he'll probably have to focus on his soon-to-be born children. Before that happens, he didn't want to leave himself a pile of troubles. Yes, your majesty, Helios responded in a low voice. Although he was about to drive the sun chariot across the sky, and the divine king had agreed to give him some gods of stars to govern, after the journey to the spirit realm, Helios felt no different than before, having moved from a small cage into a larger one. But following behind Cronus, the god of sun's eyes flickered. Visiting the spirit realm today reminded him of something he had heard from his parents. Before he was born, around the time when Cronus ascended to the throne of the divine king, the lord of the spirit realm, who had not yet created his own realm, made a prophecy, and the heavenly father also left a curse before his ascension. Just as Cronus had overthrown the previous divine king, he too would be overthrown by his own young child. Hyperion had said this in mockery, venting his anger, but reflecting on this incident, the new god of sun couldn't help but feel hopeful. As you rose, so shall you fall. This statement not only implies that he gained the throne through rebellion, but could it also be referring to me? He relies on my existence to control the sun and govern the stars, yet so blatantly disregards my interests. So why should I stand by him when a new divine king is born? Moved by the thought, he quickly suppressed it. After all, the divine king could release his father at any time, and if he couldn't resolve this issue, any current deliberations were illusory. However, aside from the yet-to-be-fulfilled prophecy, Helios thought of another way to increase his strength. I remember the god of the ocean lineage seems quite fond of matrimonial alliances. I wonder if Prince Oceanus would find me suitable. He was somewhat confident. After all, compared to just one of the Oceanides, the husband of Clymene, the goddess of renown, at least Helios was a god of sun. Therefore, what the god of speech, Iapetus, could achieve, he might as well be able to do. With differing intentions on the same path, before long, Mount of the Gods loomed into view. After the day the stars fell, the chaos world had become peaceful for a long time. The disputes over the ocean gradually ceased, and with the expansion of the world, the ever-increasing sea territories had largely been divided. Oceanus of the circumterrestrial river had acquired more than 70% of the share, and he had distributed some of it to his deserving children before integrating most of it into his own godhood. Unsurprisingly, once he fully assimilated this power, the ocean deity sovereign could also reach the peak of mighty divine power. Henceforth, the primordial sea god would no longer be his equal, and thus Pontus plunged into the deep sea trenches, the concave of the earth, as if not wanting to see the exalted ocean deities. Among the children of Pontus, most concealed themselves with their father god, except for two deities. The once peril of the sea, later goddess of beauty, Keto, and her following three furies still roamed the seas. Or rather, Keto had long stopped considering herself a daughter of the sea god, viewing Uranus as her father, since she and her three sisters were deities reborn from his divine blood. The other one was Pontus's eldest son, Nereus, who had united with the Oceanides Doris. He and his wife begot 50 mermaids, among whom were the future sea empress Amphitrite and Thetis, the mother of Achilles, one of these 50 deities. Compared to his own father, this gentle sea god had great rapport and was closely associated with many deities. With the cessation of conflicts over the seas, the mountain god Aria also returned to his domain. Unlike the sea god, the thousands of years of warfare had brought him nothing but pain and loss. Meanwhile, in the starry sky, under the auspices of the divine king, the gods had divided the territories once held by the god of sun's family. Cronus gifted the distant starry sky to the god of stars and also commanded the moon and sun to venerate Phoebe as the lord of luminous celestial bodies. Although this was but a titular homage, not involving power or authority, Phoebe was still overjoyed. Having ceased cooperation with the divine king halfway before, she had thought Cronus would not honor the agreement. Evidently, as long as it would stabilize these two Titan deities, the divine king did not mind such a token contribution. Besides, as the mother of light, Thea was, although part of the defeated faction, still treated with great courtesy by the divine king. He reserved for her the orbit through which the moon passes in the night sky and allowed some stars that survived the solar uprising to remain under her command. As for what these star deities, looking towards the empty zodiac regions in the distance, truly thought, that was no concern of his majesty, the divine king. Themis, my sister who staunchly upholds justice, I wonder if you would be willing to do me a small favor? Having redefined the trajectories of the stars with the divine artifact, the divine king handed the codex of creation to the goddess of law. By defining the trajectories of a group of stars, the power of this divine artifact had risen slightly, but it still couldn't break through that barrier. Or perhaps, A complete Genesis artifact not only requires power, but must also have a complete symbol. The life vase could originally take this step, as it inherently symbolized the origin of life. When life capable of reproducing thrived upon the earth, it could naturally cross that threshold. But once it split in two, this symbolism was torn asunder, and unless it is repaired in another manner, mere power alone can only bring it infinitely close, yet will never complete that crucial transformation. The Codex of Creation is somewhat more special. Being one component of a complete divine artifact, it can only achieve ascendance in conjunction with the other two pieces. As for what the three Genesis artifacts could combine into, that's a realm even Laine and the primordial gods remain ignorant of. If your request aligns with what befits the status of a divine king, then I shall not refuse. In the starry sky, Themis took the brass codex and nodded in agreement. Her implication was clear. If this was a scheme or a stratagem unbecoming of a divine king's stature, she would not be involved. Of course, it's just a minor matter. I heard that Laine asked you to stabilize the zodiac regions, so if possible, I'd like you to also sort out the surrounding starry domains. While destruction is easy, rebuilding is another matter entirely. Having Themis assist was one of the most cost-effective choices. The destruction caused by Paragon was too severe, with over 30% of the star deities falling into eternal slumber. These territorial gods are rarely of any use, but it's quite troublesome when many of them are missing. I'll do my best. Frowning slightly, even though he was somewhat dissatisfied with Cronus's attitude towards the star gods, all the Titan deity clan were like this now. Besides possessing an immortal essence, the powers of these quasi-gods were surprisingly weak. If they didn't also possess divine power, no one would consider them deities. I can help you, of course, but I must also remind you, Cronus, do not follow in the footsteps of our father. Looking at the spirit realm angels waiting in the distance, Themis spoke earnestly. What do you mean by that? Do I look like a tyrant to you? You know what I'm talking about, Cronus. With the Codex of Creation in her hands, the current laws of the world were clearly visible to the goddess of law. Although the conquest of the stars had further increased his divine authority, in Themis's eyes, the countdown for Cronus to resist the law of birth had essentially begun. Had it novel been at? In 500 or 600 years, the child of the divine king would be born. No one knew what choices he would make then. The father god harmed the mother goddess by committing such atrocious acts. Cronus, I won't meddle in matters between you and your children, but if you dare to treat Rhea like the father god did, I will not stand idly by. Resting her left hand lightly on the hilt of her sword, the goddess of justice's stance was very clear. It wasn't just talk for her. She would indeed act if necessary, and she had the capability to do so. After enacting the laws thousands of years ago, Themis not only saw a strengthening of her godhood, but also received two nascent divine artifacts. Now, both artifacts had come into the world. One was the golden scales, born alongside her function as the goddess of fairness, capable of passing judgment on all things in the world, distinguishing their weight. Whether the items placed on either side of the scales were physical objects or more abstract notions, it would accurately make the judgment. The heavier would sink, the lighter would rise. The other was the sword of vanquishing evil, which went hand in hand with her function as the goddess of justice. It could sense sin and differentiate the good from the bad. When facing actions that were unjust and evil, the weapon's power was especially formidable. In later generations, these two artifacts had made a significant name for themselves, and even though they were yet to be unsheathed, Cronus faintly sensed a threat. While unexpected for the divine king, the fact that the goddess of justice, who had just reached divine power level 17, had this kind of power was quite surprising. You worry too much, Themis. After all, this is my business. It has nothing to do with you. Do you intend to partake in the struggle for the throne of the divine king as well? Taking a deep breath, Cronus's expression darkened. If it were anyone else, he would have already demonstrated his divine authority, but he refrained from taking action against his sister. This was partly because he couldn't do without her given the situation among the stars, and partly because he had no intention of mistreating his queen of gods. It had been thousands of years since Rhea had firmly stood by his side, facing the desolate mount of the gods together. He would not show mercy to his own divine child, but he had the same respect for his wife. Rhea will forever be my queen of gods. She was in the past, she is now, and she will be in the future. She is the only one worthy of standing shoulder to shoulder with the divine king. But Themis, I also warn you, anyone who sides with my offspring is my relentless enemy. The strife for the throne of the divine king is a matter for your own family, but be sure not to use your tactics on a wife, a mother. Remember your promise, Cronus, I will be watching you. Turning to leave, the goddess of justice did not say more. She merely made her stance known. The fight for the throne of the divine king was, of course, justified, but Themis had no wish to see the events of her own past replayed on Rhea and her children. Since the stars were pacified, Helios had been driving his sun chariot across the sky, and the world gradually calmed down. Yet in the eyes of a few keen individuals, an invisible storm was brewing. The divine king had subdued the stars, and then he visited his uncle, Rhea, the king of mountains, in a situation that was half negotiation and half coercion. With Mount Otherworld at its center, more than 1/4 of the land came under the divine king's control. Of course, as a price, Cronus had stepped forward to warn the ocean deity sovereign. Regardless of what had happened before, if he were to incite disputes with the ancient sea gods again, or allow the oceanides to encroach upon the domain of the mountain gods, then the divine king would make a just decision. Oceanus remained silent in response, but his deities truly became more restrained than before, which made Rhea believe that the territory he was forced to surrender still had its value. However, at some point, a rumor began to circulate among the chaotic gods. The divine king, influenced by the will of the world, was about to sire a child of his own. But as in the prophecy and the curse of the heavenly father, just as it had happened before, Cronus would be overthrown by his progeny. For a while, the world became eerily quiet. At the center of the earth, on that highest peak, the attention of all deities converged. Everyone wanted to know what choice Cronus would make in the face of the curse and prophecy. Would he, like the heavenly father, resort to violence, fighting destiny with force, or would he seek a milder approach, trying to circumvent the problem in a more roundabout way? At Mount Otherworld, in the divine king's bedchamber, the omen of divine birth had already begun to show. Ripples spread across the source sea, manifesting in the form of law chains that covered the mount of the gods from top to bottom. Had it novel been at? However, contrary to what the gods had imagined, standing at the gates of the palace, Cronus, feeling the increasingly intense fluctuations of the laws around him, felt no nervousness or anger. On the contrary, he was very relaxed, even finding the time to pour himself a cup of nectar and casually observe the many attentive gazes, both overt and covert. Of course, he also had to deal with his sister, who stood by his side. Centuries had passed, and with the efforts of the goddess of law, the disasters once wrought by the god of sun had been mostly quelled. The blessings from the stars also took effect on the divine king. Now, Cronus had truly reached the pinnacle of great divine power. But it was only upon reaching this point that he finally understood how terrifying great divine power could be. The barrier before him was like an abyss, not just impossible to cross, but he couldn't even fathom its depth. It was so profound that even infusing the enhancement from nearly 1/3 of the land into it wouldn't stir up the slightest ripple. As you can see, Themis, I'm not worried about the first child Rhea is bearing for me, Cronus said, discerning the subtle gazes coming from every direction. In fact, I have previously determined through certain means that this first child about to be born is a goddess, not an existence that could potentially threaten me. So you need not be so guarded. I won't do anything to a new god that poses no threat. While he spoke in this manner, in his heart, Cronus merely planned to delay dealing with it. After all, back when he had wielded the sword, his siblings had stood by his side. Naturally, he would not make the same mistake a second time. If that is the case, I apologize to you, but I still wish to stay and witness the final outcome. Themis responded succinctly, unapologetic about her possible mistake. As a goddess of justice, if she had misunderstood the situation, it was only right for her to offer an apology. There's no need for that, but if possible, please let me stay among the stars a while longer. Cronus shook his head and replied, I estimate it will take at least several hundred years before everything returns to its original state. Until then, I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you. I understand. Having received an answer, Themis spoke no more and instead looked towards the direction of the sleeping chamber. The fluctuations of the laws surrounding them grew more intense, and those subtle gazes became increasingly dense, but none of this concerned the goddess of justice. Right now, she only wanted to wait for Queen Rhea to give birth to her progeny and then return to the stars. It was not only because the chaotic starfields made her instinctively uncomfortable, but also because she did not fancy the god struggles for power and profit. If she were to use her alternate title, Sword of Judgment, known as the Sword of Vanquishing Evil, to sense most of the deities of chaos would provoke some reaction from the divine artifact, one by one. Time ticked away, and the chains of law extending from the Mount of the Gods became clearer and clearer. All of these signs indicated that the deity about to be born possessed a very strong divine position. But where this godhood would come from was unclear. Perhaps a new concept would be born in the world, or maybe an ancient god would split their position. Time gradually moved into the evening. The moon rose high, and all was silence. At a certain moment, a red light was born from the highest reaches of the sky. It stretched down to the earth, reflecting in rivers and lakes. Simultaneously, the laws proclaimed the birth of a new deity to all living beings. Hestia, the goddess of fire and guardianship. The appearance of the new deity caused a momentary stillness in the laws, but they did not stop. Instead, they grew even more vehement. The red light gradually faded, replaced by shades of green and yellow interweave. The new phenomenon spanned an even broader scope than what had enshrouded them before. The oceans, the underworld, and all plants swiftly matured under an invisible force, bearing bountiful fruits. Does it have to do with plants? What a bother, Cronus said, his expression turning grave as he perceived what was happening. The advent of Hestia was merely the prelude. Her divine position was not as strong as imagined due to the incompleteness of fire. Guardianship, although powerful, was still somewhat lacking compared to the deities that would follow. However, the strength of the divine position was secondary. The fact that the second deity was associated with plants meant that it would once again divide the divine authority of Mother Earth. Due to the titans imprisoned in the abyss, Cronus already had a somewhat delicate relationship with Gaia, and he did not know what choice Mother Earth would make when the new deity was born. However, the birth of a god was not influenced by his thoughts, and the aura of all things sprouting grew stronger. Even within the temple, Cronus sensed the presence of an accompanying divine artifact. Shortly after, along with the thundering of the earth, a verdant light streaked across from the east and shot directly into the temple, announcing the true name of the new deity to the world. Demeter, the goddess of the growth of all things. Following the birth of the new deity, the tumult of the primordial sea gradually calmed. At the same time, all beings with intermediate divine power and above could sense that the divine position of plants had almost completely separated from Mother Earth. In the past, the true emblem of plants was not Gaia, but the golden apple tree that had sprouted from the seed of all things in the life vase. Now even the divine position governing the growth and decay of plants had been cleaved by the world, leaving her only with the role of the creator of the plants in the current world. Plants are closely linked to the earth. They draw nutrients from it and ultimately return to it. With the loss of this power, the force of Mother Earth was bound to slide down further, unavoidably. Even more critically, even the speed of her power's recovery would be affected. The gods varied in their response, but they all knew that with the birth of the deities walking upon the earth, the relationship between the two ruling forces had once again deteriorated. Near the Delphic Great Plains, the dwelling place of Mother Earth. The brilliance gradually faded away. The miraculous signs of divine birth dissipated into the air, yet the changes occurring within Gaia had not stopped. As Demeter came into the world, the power of Mother Earth, which had been slowly recovering to its former state, plummeted once more, and her 40-something appearance aged a few years again. From the outside, it seemed she had returned to how she looked thousands of years ago. Her hair color became somewhat dry. Her green skirt began to fade to yellow, and, expectedly, this time, it would not return to its original state. After all, the vitality of all things is but a skirt draped over the earth, just as the secret shroud over Mother Night. Now that she had lost this part of her godhood, the chain reaction manifested first in the anthropomorphic image of the deity. At the same time, a part of Gaia's divine status shattered once again. Compared to the twin gods of the Dark Night, she now possessed less than half of their remaining strength. It must be known that at the dawn of creation, Gaia was actually the one with the most robust origin. She was the symbol of the world's primordial matter, the cornerstone of all existence in the present world, but now she retained only the part that belonged to the earth. Bang! Power rippled through the surroundings, and as the emotions of Mother Earth fluctuated, the strata began to resonate. Not far away, the golden humanity, near the Oracle of Delphi, was clueless as to the cause, left with no choice but to pray to the deities. But Gaia paid no attention to them, her heart filled with a wrath that had nowhere to vent. She wanted to go to the Mount of the Gods to confront the Divine King, but she knew that this was not about Cronus. Moreover, she no longer had the power to overwhelm him. Chaos. I regarded you as my father, yet you treat me this way. Among the deities of the present world, only she, from the moment of her birth, had continually been stripped of her powers. As one of the primordial gods, she felt as though she was a tool used by the world, endlessly nurturing new gods with her own flesh and blood. She did not know why this was happening. Perhaps it was because the laws of the world instinctively did not want too powerful a deity walking the earth. So as a fully personified primordial god, she was naturally targeted. Addit novel Benedette. Even though she had never exercised her powers recklessly since the day she was born, the world devoid of will did not care about this. It had no character, and therefore would not differentiate between deities. Whether compliant or ambitious, it only looked at what you have done and what you're capable of doing. Erebus was right. Sometimes I'm just too indecisive. Maybe I should be more straightforward. I don't need to think so much. As a primordial god born with the world, as long as the world continues to exist, I don't have anything to worry about. It was quite a while before Gaia calmed down, and she remembered the evaluation given to her by her brother, the Dark Overlord. She could have intimidated Cronus into releasing the Titans from the abyss when he was still weak, but instead, she chose to leave Mount Otherworld alone and came to this plane, which at the time had no name. Moanda, she softly called out to her servant, and Gaia reached out to catch a stream of golden light that flew from afar, landing in her palm. A rich essence of life swirled around it, but sadly, for Gaia, it was of no use. Even the remnants of her divine status made many things in this world ineffective against her, including what she held in her hand. It could repair a divine body, enhance divine power, but faced with the remnants of a primordial god status, it was nothing more than an ordinary fruit. Your Highness, did you call for me? From the woods, not far from Gaia, a figure appeared in response to her call. It was the foremost among the nymphs serving Mother Earth, who had been granted divinity by Gaia, thus achieving immortality. Moanda, I command you to set off for Mount of the Gods now, Gaia slowly said as she looked in the direction of the mountain, to congratulate the birth of the two new deities on my behalf, and take my gift there as well. But on your return, remember to have the god of speech, Iapetus, come to see me. However, make sure the divine king knows nothing of this. You can do that, right? She intended to keep the divine king's attention elsewhere, letting him think she did not want to oppose him. Of course, that was indeed the case. Gaia was not adept at fighting, so she would not resort to force to solve problems. Fortunately, her brother had prepared everything for her long ago, and although he had his own agenda, Gaia did not care. "I will, Your Highness," a beautiful nymph fairy promised reverently from the side. Although it was difficult, after all, speaking with a true god within the Divine King's domain without being discovered was nearly impossible. But perhaps, sensing the wrath of the principal god, Moanda spoke no unnecessary words. "Then you may go." With a nod, Gaia handed over the object to the nymph fairy and left her divine power upon her. This signified that she was protected by the earth and was an envoy recognized by Mother Earth. After a slight bow, Moanda took the object and turned to depart. As a weak nymph, even with Mother Earth's help, she needed to set off without delay. Half a day later, Gaia's initially fluctuating aura gradually stabilized as she gazed toward the Oracle of Delphi, not far away, reaffirming her decision in her heart once again. The lifespan of golden humanity was drawing to an end, yet Cronus feared the prophecy. Thus, despite the god's suggestions to create the next generation of life long ago, the Divine King still adamantly refused. He issued an order that no god should create new life, or else it would be deemed an act of hostility against him. Various gods abandoned the idea, and Gaia also hesitated until today. Erebus wanted to unveil the secrets of creation and then steal the power of the world. Then let him try. It would be best if he hollowed out the current world so that he no longer had the ability to sway the direction of godhood. Cronus did not wish for humans to be born, but she was determined to create silver humanity, to let him know as well, "If you refuse to release the Titans from the abyss, I will not make things easy for you either." Compared to her previous reservations, Gaia now only wanted to do something according to her own heart's desire, no matter what it was. Besides, perhaps it was because she had once briefly held the oracle, or maybe it was a spontaneous warning from her remaining divine status. But she could faintly sense that in the not-too-distant future, new gods would come to split her power. And without a surprise, these new gods would also come from Mount of the Gods. Be it the Divine King or the world, it's all the same. Clenching her fist, she whispered softly, as if to encourage herself. "Greed, willfulness, egocentrism, chaos, Uranus, and now Cronus, they all care about themselves. No one has ever cared about me. But if you do not wish to let me be at peace, then not one of you, not a single one, shall find peace." Upon the great plains, Mother Earth sent out her servants, and elsewhere, the gods all reacted accordingly. The presence of the two goddesses, who were the first to emerge, caused those quietly observing the Mount of the Gods to retract their gazes. Hestia, the eldest daughter of the Divine King, although skilled in the godhoods of fire and protection, which are well suited for combat, it was uncertain whether she could enter into the ranks of those with formidable divine power because of the imperfection of one of these forces. Even if possible, it would likely take an exceedingly long time. As for the other goddess, Demeter, her godhood was too inclined toward support. Even with strong divine power, her combat capability was very limited. Moreover, in the traditions of the Chaos world, a goddess could not ascend to the throne of the Divine King. Since there was no possibility of challenging Cronus's rule, naturally no god was particularly concerned about this. They chose to wait for the birth of the divine child. "You've worked hard." Entering the royal chamber, Cronus spoke softly upon seeing the two infants in Rhea's arms. "I'm fine." Rhea's complexion was somewhat pale, but her spirits were still decent. However, upon seeing her husband's figure, she glanced at her two children with a worried expression. "How do you plan to treat them?" she asked. "They are goddesses and won't become the person mentioned in the prophecy and curse. I know, they have no chance of replacing me. But when facing our father, my siblings also stood by my side, did they not?" He shook his head, but seeing the changing complexion of the Queen of Gods, Cronus still reassured her. "However, you need not worry. Adet Novel Benedat. Their divine powers are still very weak and not powerful enough. The time of the prophecy has not yet come. I have a better solution. If possible, let's keep it this way. He extended his hand, and the power of time surged around him. When the invisible fluctuation covered the two goddesses, their growth slowed. The divine power transformed into a golden liquid, sealing the two infant girls inside, much like two translucent gemstones. Cronus placed them aside and then sat down at the edge of the bed. Let's leave it at this for the time being. At least for now, their powers do not pose much of a burden to me. Relieved, Rhea relaxed. Yet, being in charge of a godhood related to time herself, the Queen of Gods was well aware of how much power was constantly drained to delay the growth of two potent divine children. What about later? We won't only have these two children. We'll discuss that later. Cronus interrupted. He had his thoughts, but he knew Rhea would certainly not accept them, so he chose not to speak of them. Reverting deities to their mother's womb is both harmful to the mother and a desecration of the law of procreation established by the Heavenly Father and Mother Earth. The precedent was still fresh before his eyes. Cronus would not stubbornly oppose it. Furthermore, the prophecy had shown a point in time, the birth of the silver humanity. As long as the new life had not yet appeared on the earth, the future was not so frightening. If he could think of a solution to the prophecy during this period, that would be best. If not, it was not too late to make arrangements later. After spending some time with the Queen of Gods and sensing the Goddess of Justice's disappearing presence outside the temple, Cronus smiled and then left the royal chamber. With the birth of his eldest daughter, he needed to make certain of some things. After all, these would not be his only children. Zephyrus, the leader of the wind gods, whom I personally ennobled in the past 1,000 years, has anyone defied my orders? Stepping through the temple's grand doorway, his smile fading, Cronus asked in a grave tone. Days before, he had summoned the god of west wind back. If the divine birth had not been a day earlier than he anticipated, the divine king would not have had him wait outside the temple. No, your majesty. In fact, the gods do not possess that capability. Next to him, Zephyrus materialized from his ethereal form and bowed respectfully to the divine king. Creation of life is only possible through the combined action of the elixir from the life vase and the water from the well of origins. Therefore, even though the creatures of the earth have gradually become sparse, no deity has created new life. Nodding, Cronus was satisfied with Zephyrus's answer. The birth of silver humanity, the rise of the second mount of the gods, the latter he did not know when it would happen. After all, creating a mountain had many ways to achieve, but creating humans was controllable. Previously, his children had not been born, so he was only generally prepared for the birth of a new human race. But now things were different. Silver humanity, strife would arise upon the earth, and Cronus would start here to test the strength of fate. In doing anything, one must proceed from weak to strong, and so it was with confronting fate. If the fate involving the succession of the divine king was something he was now powerless to stop, then Cronus would use silver humanity as a medium to test just how strong the power of fate truly was. Or perhaps this at least would allow him to understand fate better, to comprehend the mechanism by which it acted upon the present world. Even if silver humanity still emerged, this would be valuable experience for him. Zephyrus, I have another task for you. Looking toward the east of the earth, Cronus said indifferently, "Go to the Delphic Great Plains, watch over that place for me, and record which deities have visited there. Since creating life cannot proceed without the life vase, then all I need to do is keep a close watch on its existence. Note down every being that might borrow the divine artifact, and I shall visit each in turn." His expression changed upon hearing that he was to spy near the dwelling of another primordial god. The god of west wind instinctively wanted to refuse. Although Mother Earth was far less daunting than Nyx, actually, the deterrent effect was the other way around. Nyx was indeed unobtrusive. Given her personification, she could not walk outside the land of eternal night for long. So Zephyrus thought to himself, even if he were discovered by her, it would not be a big deal. But Gaia was different. The god of west wind had no doubts that if Mother Earth detected his surveillance, his fate would certainly not be a pleasant one. "I'm not negotiating with you, Zephyrus." Discerning the hesitation of the god of the west wind, Cronus said with a smile, "Your position as the leader of the wind gods was bestowed by the power of the divine king, not heaven sent, and, as such, it can also be revoked. However, just like the last time, I will not ask you to do anything for nothing. Fulfill my task, and I shall reward you handsomely." He extended his hand, and a beam of light flashed. The next moment, a scepter that seemed to be cast from gold appeared in the hands of the divine king. It seemed newly born, still unconsciously releasing power into its surroundings. At the top of the scepter, a yellow-green gemstone was set, and one glance would allow anyone to feel that it symbolized both the withering and the flourishing of all things. The wheat gold scepter, it's the accompanying divine artifact of my second daughter. It can cause all things to grow, as well as strip them of vitality, turning them into dust. Fondling the shaft of the divine artifact, the divine king envied it. An accompanying divine artifact wielded incredible power in the hands of its owner and could not be taken by others. If it weren't for the fact that Demeter had just been born and was not yet aware of the loss of this treasure, then at a mere thought from her, this artifact would be stripped of its divine power. But for now, it seemed that for a considerable length of time, Demeter would likely have no chance to reclaim her artifact. "Take it. Although this is the accompanying treasure of my second daughter, she is still an infant and naturally cannot reclaim the power of the artifact. I can entrust it to you to imbue the west wind with vitality henceforth. If you are discovered by Mother Earth, you can use it to save your life as well." After a moment's hesitation, facing the scepter passed by the divine king, the god of west wind still accepted it. On one hand, just as the divine king had said, he was not really asking for his opinion. Should he truly refuse, then any of the other three wind gods could easily replace him. On the other hand, the fact that the divine king had given away the divine artifact of his own daughter, although unsaid, Zephyrus had guessed that the newly born goddess of growth might not meet a good end. With both considerations combined, naturally, he could not refuse the divine king's request. "I will do my best, your majesty." Having received the scepter, Zephyrus bowed deeply. "Then be off. Soon enough, the various gods who come to congratulate will arrive. When they return, you must watch carefully. Any god who comes near Mother Earth's dwelling, you must note them all." After giving his final instruction, Cronus waved his hand, permitting the god of west wind to depart. The divine king trusted in the capabilities of the god of west wind. It had to be said that since the last time he had sent Zephyrus to the underworld, he suddenly found this particularly courageous deity quite useful, at least in surveillance of others. Even if there was a vast difference in strength, it seemed he could bring about a satisfactory outcome for himself. The divine king fathered a child, and regardless of their attitudes, all the gods sent envoys bearing congratulatory gifts. Essences and gemstones from the sea, star cores left after celestial bodies shattered, and unique minerals nurtured in the underworld, some delivered personally by deities, others by nymphs. All in all, they were transported to the Mount of the Gods, becoming part of the divine king's collection. However, for the gods, these trinkets only seemed useful. They contained potent energy, but the gods did not know how to utilize them. Or, to be more precise, even if they did, there was no need to use them. In the presence of divine power, such meager energies were hardly noteworthy. Atop Mount Otherworld, it was uncertain whether the gods' envoys felt disappointment while watching the harmonious divine king and queen of gods, as usual. The attendance of Moanda, the servant of Mother Earth, only made the banquet livelier. Previously, Mother Earth's attitude had been an enigma, but now it was clear, at least on the surface, Gaia did not yet intend to make an enemy of the divine king. "Your Majesty, I am here following the command of the Mother of all gods to congratulate the birth of the two goddesses," Moanda said with neither subservience nor arrogance, standing in the middle of the great hall under the gaze of numerous deities. "Welcome, envoy of Mother Earth." Cronus nodded with a smile. "Please take a seat. Today, I permit you to join the assembly of gods." Other envoys who had come to offer congratulations were seated in a side hall, but as the messenger of Mother Earth who also brought information Cronus desired, Moanda was made an exception. Despite some gods feeling dissatisfied, believing that the nymph had no right to sit amongst them, they held their tongues due to the presence of the two most powerful beings, the Divine King and Mother Earth. "Thank you for your hospitality, Your Majesty. But before I take my seat, I have a gift for the respected Queen of Gods, the keeper of elapsed time, to convey Mother Earth's greetings," Moanda said. With a modest bow and upon receiving permission, Moanda extended her hand. The gods' eyes were drawn to her, for they saw something both familiar and unfamiliar. Familiar because many had seen it before, unfamiliar because they had never possessed it. The fruit, imbued with pure life force, stirred a profound longing in them, as it was a rare treasure that could help deities quickly accumulate divine power and heal their losses. A golden apple. Rhea recognized it too. Some surprise flickered across the Queen of God's face as she stepped forward and personally received the legendary divine artifact. Her breach of etiquette was overlooked because of the charm of the golden apple. As the world's first created being, the divine tree growing from the seed of all things, the fruit of the golden apple tree was, to a certain degree, a manifestation of the law of life. Had the golden apple tree possessed wisdom, then the life vase might not have become a divine artifact belonged to Gaia. For in comparison to Mother Earth, the seed of all things was intrinsically bound to the vase from the start. "Yes, Your Majesty has borne offspring, for which Mother Earth has sent me with this treasure," Moanda said with a slight smile, offering the golden apple with both hands. If it weren't for the fact that it had little effect on beings of great divine power, Gaia wouldn't have given away such a precious item. But since it was of no use to her, it was merely an ordinary treasure. Over the years, there had been more than one occasion when the golden apple tree bore fruit. This apple was just one among them. "Please convey my gratitude to Mother Earth." Rhea was excited but more ashamed. She thought that after diluting Mother Earth's power with the birth of her daughters, Gaia would not show her a friendly face. Yet, contrary to her expectations, Mother Earth not only did not hold a grudge, but also sent a golden apple as a gift. By consuming it, the vital essence lost during childbirth would be replenished, and even divine power could see a rise. But Rhea intended to keep it, believing that such a precious treasure should not be used so casually, and that it also served as a token of reconciliation between Mother Earth and the Divine King. "I shall." After giving a respectful response, Moanda followed the Queen of Gods to the long table designated for deities. Rhea had intended for her to sit at her side, but Moanda declined the offer. "To sit with the gods is already an honor for me. How could I dare to take a place by your side and cause gods to sit beneath me?" she said. Facing Moanda's polite refusal, Rhea had no choice but to accept. After all, there were indeed many in attendance who felt the same way. So, Rhea let her go, watching the nymph take her place at the end of the long table, next to the god of speech, Iapetus, and his son, the dull-witted afterthinker, Epimetheus. Adat novel Benedat. This weakest original titan was somewhat surprised, but nonetheless welcomed her. The seat beside him was typically reserved for his wife, the goddess of renown, Clymene. However, in such gatherings of the gods, Clymene often chose not to be beside him. This was because, at times like these, the goddess of renown became all the more aware of her husband's lack of strength and status among the gods, which was undeniably unbecoming for the goddess of renown. Moanda, finding her seat, signified that the final powerful deity's envoy had arrived, and the banquet commenced. The divine king, from his principal seat, gave thanks to the guests, followed by the custom of nymphs singing in the hall and gods and goddesses occasionally stepping out. The gods were not surprised. Although the mores among deities were not as liberal as in Olympus, a few had started to abandon the fine traditions since the time of Heavenly Father and Mother Earth. Some deities disapproved of this behavior, but most were indifferent. After all, morality among the gods at that time was unlike in later times. If they had abstained from such actions previously, It was merely for lack of desire. In the blink of an eye, 3 months passed. Some divine beings left the great hall while others joined. When the divine king and queen of gods left as well, Moanda held back her attachment and turned to look at the deities beside her. It was time for her to attend to important matters. This was her first time participating in the deities' banquet as a guest rather than a servant. She savored this experience, but sadly knew that a second opportunity was unlikely. "Your Highness, Iapetus," Moanda began. With a slight lift of her cheeks, Moanda noticed that the wife of the god of speech, the goddess of renown, Laine, had vanished without a trace. Although she did not know where she had gone, it was clear that she was no longer in the Great Hall. "As an ancient Titan god, you really are modest." In a gentle tone, Moanda tried her best to appear like an ordinary nymph who yearned for the true god. "Haha, the servant of Mother Earth, that is not what I wish for. It's just that compared to my brothers, I simply do not possess their great divine power." Shaking his head, Iapetus laughed helplessly. Ever since humans were created, he often lived among the golden humanity with his 2 children. Prometheus was interested in learning the skills from the Lord of the Spirit Realm, mastering them, and creating new variations. He enjoyed this process immensely. For him, imparting knowledge to mortals was a joy in itself. By contrast, Epimetheus was much more silent. He would often sit to one side, silently watching his elder brother. He kept his opinions to himself, appearing puppet-like, so unlike Prometheus's wisdom. However, if tasked to do something, Epimetheus often managed to do it well. Hence, the god of speech did not demean his second child as some other deities might, referring to him as the god of dullness. He preferred to call him the after-thinker, because it seemed Epimetheus did not enjoy creating or thinking, only learning and executing. And then there's Atlas. I can hardly fathom how Laine and I could have brought such a powerful deity into being. A sigh resounded in his heart. In comparison with his first 2 sons, the god of speech's 3rd child was not particularly close to him. The god of strength, Atlas, as his godhood suggested, only respected strength, which Iapetus lacked. In the eyes of Atlas, he himself was a second-generation Titan to whom the divine king had great expectations, endowed with strong divine power, while his father Iapetus was simply unworthy of the title of first-generation Titan. Consequently, he seldom stayed with his father and brothers. Regardless, you are a mighty true god. His thoughts fleeting, when the god of speech returned to his senses, the beautiful nymph across from him was raising her cup, smiling at him with words of praise. I am left with only the title of a true god. Shaking his head, although he self-deprecated with his words, the god of speech was still pleased. In the past, apart from the humans on Earth, few lives had so praised him. And so, he and the nymph serving Mother Earth, a guest invited by the divine king, engaged in back-and-forth conversation. Due to his own lack of strength, Iapetus' relationship with his niece and wife, the goddess of renown, Laine, had grown increasingly distant. Influenced by her godhood, Laine did not fancy modesty or silence, and the god of speech had not been without quarrels with her in the past. But now, he felt that the nymph before him truly understood his thoughts, every word striking at his heart. After an unknown stretch of time, as the 2 left the temple together, Epimetheus, who was at the side, picked up a cup and poured himself some nectar. He drank alone for a while, and then turned to look beside him at Prometheus. "Brother." Called by Epimetheus, Prometheus turned with a puzzled expression. His younger brother seldom spoke, so when he did, the forethinker always listened to what he had to say. Although most of the time Epimetheus would say some strange things, pose unnecessary questions, Prometheus was still willing to listen. If you encountered a situation where turning a blind eye could avoid disaster, but would leave an existence you value worried and disconcerted, attempting to change it not only has uncertain outcomes, but also requires a price to be paid. Would you still go through with it? Seeing his brother turn towards him, Epimetheus asked earnestly. "Probably, with my abilities, I can always think of a way to solve the problem." Although he didn't know why his brother suddenly asked such a question, Prometheus still answered. He was always proud of his intelligence, and even if he fell short in strength, he believed his superior wisdom would secure him a position in the future. Is that so? Epimetheus nodded thoughtfully, but I wouldn't. My abilities are limited, and I know there are many things in this world that I cannot change with my strength. Since I cannot change them, I'd rather be an observer. It's okay, you still have me, Prometheus assured, though puzzled as to why his brother suddenly pondered such questions. There's no problem in this world without a solution. If there is, it's just that the right method hasn't been found yet. Even the so-called destiny from legends can't necessarily be unchangeable. Perhaps he heard, or perhaps he did not, but Epimetheus returned to his former, dazed appearance. In this world, the only two known destinies are the succession of the divine king and the birth of silver humanity. Epimetheus felt that, for both these predicaments, Prometheus's much-prided wisdom couldn't change either. In the midst of a daze, not knowing if he was truly drunk or feigning it, Iapetus was supported by Moanda as they walked through a garden and into a palace. This was one of the palaces that the divine king had deliberately built, serving as a residence for the deities who lived on the mount of the gods year-round. Indeed, Iapetus was aware of this place. In other parts of Mount Otherworld, as the ruler of the sacred mountain, Cronus was almost omniscient. As long as he wished, no existence below the primordial gods, not possessing special divine authority, could easily elude his notice. But only this vicinity was different. Out of respect for the guests, the divine king never peered into this area. No matter what happened, no one would approach. Leaning against the corner of the bed with Moanda's assistance, Iapetus quietly awaited the nymph's next move. But in the next moment, he was startled awake by her words. "Respected god of speech," Moanda said, straightening her expression with a smile, "I have come on a special visit, following the order of Mother Earth." At it novel Benedat. Swish! Almost as soon as the words left her mouth, Iapetus sat up straight, forcibly pulling himself back to sobriety. "What did you say?" Looking at the nymph before him with some disbelief, Iapetus even thought he had heard wrong. This wasn't a matter of carelessness. The god of speech hadn't been on guard against Moanda simply because he trusted too much in his own godhood. Earlier in the underworld, Iapetus had encountered the goddess of deceit, Apate, and personally experienced her power. Under the influence of his godhood, the words of the goddess of deceit felt as if laced with magic power, easily convincing everyone who heard her speak. However, through the office of speech, Iapetus easily identified the flaws in her words. But today, up until he arrived here, there had been no warning from his godhood. The authority of a deity is absolute. Unless there is a great disparity in divine power or an overlap of godhood, there is no error. Therefore, if the nymph in front of him wasn't masquerading as one of the primordial gods, it meant that she hadn't deceived him in any way, not even in the slightest. Do not misunderstand. I would not dare to lie in your presence. Indeed, everything I said earlier was heartfelt, she assured. I truly admire the powerful true gods, and I am indeed just a common nymph. If it weren't for taking on a command from Mother Earth, I would have no contact with the other gods. If you wish, after we discuss the main issue, I think we can still have a chat. However, Moanda said softly with a slight smile, compared to our matter, aren't you going to listen to Mother Earth's intentions? As he listened to Moanda's explanation, Iapetus' feelings slowly stabilized, and he began to regain his composure. Although Mother Earth was undeniably powerful, this was Mount Otherworld, the domain of the Divine King. Since taking control of the stars and subduing the mountains, Cronus's divine authority had only grown. Considering that Mother Earth was not adept at combat, and having recently been weakened by the split of her godhood, she might not necessarily be able to defeat the Divine King now. After a moment of contemplation, the god of speech cautiously said, "Whatever order the respected mother of all gods has, this is the territory of the Divine King. Your cautious approach to meet with me here suggests that the Divine King would not approve of what you ask of me," he continued. "That I'm unaware of." The Highness ordered me to avoid the divine king, and naturally, I followed her command, she responded. Since you are unwilling to know, then I will take my leave, she said, and without showing concern for the outcome, Moanda gave a slight bow and turned to leave. Wait, Iapetus called out. Even though he really wanted to watch her leave, how could he when he had followed her here in the first place? Anticipating ahead of time, acting oblivious, and personally coming here to decline were completely different concepts. Regardless of whether he intended to comply, it was necessary to listen. Speak plainly. What does Mother Earth want me to do? After giving it some thought, Iapetus spoke slowly. I will consider it before making a decision. Stopping in her tracks, Moanda showed no surprise at his choice. Just as the nymph had no choice before the true god, the ordinary true gods also had no choice before Mother Earth and the divine king. Some might choose to stand firmly on one side, but Iapetus was clearly not among them. He had always been just a temporary resident of the Mount of the Gods, and considering his weak power and his status as an ancient Titan god, the divine king had never asked anything of him. In the eyes of Cronus, producing Atlas, the god of strength, was the greatest contribution Iapetus could make. It's not about opposing the divine king or anything like that. In fact, Mother Earth simply wants to meet with you. With a smile, Moanda spoke. Actually, this could be a good thing for you, couldn't it? No one knows what the future holds for the divine king. But as one of the primordial gods born alongside the world, Mother Earth will surely exist forever. Perhaps your task is done, whether I go or not. I will decide for myself. Looking somewhat displeased, but in the end, despite what he said, Iapetus decided to go. Whether Mother Earth is eternal, he did not know, but according to the prophecy and curses, there's a high probability that the divine king is not. At least in his perception, even though Cronus's power grew day by day, it still fell short when compared to the former father god. If he was careful enough, there shouldn't be any problems. If need be, he could find a desolate place to hide until Cronus met his fate at the hands of destiny. After the conversation, the god of speech did not stay with Moanda for long. He hurried back to the temple he had come from, found his 2 children, and instructed them to go to the territory of the god of the ocean after the banquet. As for his wife Clymene, being one of the Oceanides, she usually spent quite a bit of time at sea. Prometheus didn't understand his father's request, but he complied with Iapetus' wishes. Epimetheus remained silent as always, and neither his father nor his brother sought to consult his opinion. Another 2 months passed, and the birthday celebration for the second daughter of the divine king finally came to an end. The gods returned to their respective territories, and Moanda, carrying Cronus's return gift to Mother Earth, set off back to the Delphic Great Plains. Taking this opportunity, when no one was paying attention, Iapetus also left Mount of the Gods. Blending with the multitude of departing deities, the presence of the god of speech was unremarkable. No one took notice of his whereabouts. In fact, this Titan god, who preferred the company of humans, had always been inconspicuous among the gods. Even the divine king assumed that Iapetus had gone to join his 2 children in some human tribe. Hurrying along the way, by the time Iapetus reached the Delphic Great Plains, 7 days had passed. Hovering in midair, the god of speech was about to fly directly to Mother Earth's abode, but suddenly his gaze caught sight of a human tribe established not far away. These were the golden humanity who once lived near the Oracle of Delphi. Unlike those dwelling at sea or the far western edge of the continent, being near Mother Earth, they had avoided the impact of the divine wars, even though Gaia rarely bothered with them. Therefore, although they were equally near the end of their lives, there had been no change in their numbers. Their lives were primitive and constant, barely touched by the influence of other human tribes. The god of speech was curious. He and his 2 children had lived with different humans, but this did not include those from Delphi. Due to his temporary stay on Mount of the Gods, he had always avoided this place. After meeting with Mother Earth, I'm afraid I'll be busy again. Although I don't know what the Mother Goddess will ask me to do, it's unlikely to be an easy task. Since there's no fixed time appointed, I might as well take this chance to visit the humans from these origins. After all, because of the delicate relationship between Cronus and Mother Goddess, I've never come this way before. Making up his mind, Iapetus paused in his tracks. After some thought, he concealed his divine power and transformed himself into a large earthy yellow snake, then landed on the ground and slithered toward the direction of the human tribe. He did not intend to reveal his identity as a deity. After all, he was only there to take a look. The humans in these parts must revere Mother Earth, and if he displayed his true divine form, it would inevitably lead to their worship. He had no desire to overshadow and displease Mother Earth. Following little paths carved by humans in the forests and wilderness, the god of speech quickly advanced across the Delphic Great Plains. Birds and beasts along the way failed to detect his presence, and no unexpected incidents occurred. Iapetus easily sneaked into the settlement of the Golden Humanity. He thus entered Delphi, but the god of speech did not realize that surrounding the Great Plains in the sky was a seemingly naturally occurring current of air that drifted continuously. This current of air circled the area, whirling swiftly, monitoring any life that drew near. The serpent that Iapetus had transformed into was also in its sight, but unfortunately, it did not realize there was anything amiss with the snake. Just as Iapetus could not see through the true identity of the current of air and recognize it as Zephyrus, the god of the west wind, the god of the west wind did not penetrate his illusionary transformation. Or rather, Zephyrus hadn't even imagined that a god would come here in such a manner instead of flying in openly. His attention was mostly on the passing deities, not every animal entering or leaving the area. After all, besides himself and the divine king, no one knew that Zephyrus had been ordered to surveil the plains, so he focused most of his attention on the sky, with only a small portion on the ground. Perhaps it was coincidence, perhaps it was fate, but either way, the two deities unknowingly passed by each other. 3 days later, after concluding his observation of the human tribe at the secluded dwelling of Mother Earth, Iapetus met with Mother Earth Gaia. Not far from the oracle of Delphi, a yellow serpent twisted and transformed, returning to its original form as a handsome deity. Regardless of their behavior, the children of chaos, in terms of appearance alone, were indeed handsome men and beautiful women, each with their own sense of beauty. Like the god of sun Hyperion, he exuded a masculine beauty, much like his godhood. The god of the ocean, Oceanus, represented a rugged beauty, his muscles strong, yet not off-putting. They were all tall, but not awkwardly so. And then there was the divine king Cronus, who gave off an aura of majestic solemnity, and the god of strength Atlas need not even be mentioned, for he looked like the valiant heroes of myths and legends. Or more precisely, the heroes resembled him. As for the god of speech Iapetus, and his eldest son Prometheus, they both seemed delicate. However, the aura of the deities reminded everyone who saw them that they were by no means powerless. He walked slowly forward until he could vaguely see a hut naturally formed by plants, where the god of speech stopped. Indistinctly, Iapetus could feel a life force behind the hut. It wasn't Mother Earth, for on the ground, common people could hardly distinguish between Gaia and the earth itself. So, unsurprisingly, it would be the world's first plant, the legendary golden apple tree, possessing part of the power of life and symbolizing plant life itself. Iapetus, come to pay you respects, Mother Goddess. Hand over chest, the god of speech respectfully greeted her. Pay respects, but I'm not at all at peace, my child. Soon after, with the sound of creaking, a woman in a green dress stepped out from the hut. Catching a glimpse of Mother Earth, the god of speech could clearly see that Gaia hadn't changed much since the creation of humans, with fine lines barely visible at the corners of her eyes. It was apparent that with Demeter's birth, the power she had regained over thousands of years had once again scattered. Yet even so, Iapetus still felt the overwhelming pressure, the status of great divine power. Even what little was left represented a fundamental difference. Mother Goddess, The godhood of new gods is determined by the laws of the current world. And if there was a choice, the divine king would not wish for such a daughter. This wasn't speaking in defense of the divine king. It was simply the truth. After all, given the choice, he would prefer all of his children to be weak deities with meager divine power. I know, but I don't care about that anymore. Cronus isn't willing to release his brothers from the abyss, so I see he doesn't really consider me at all, Gaia said with a snort, looking at her weakest divine child. I have a task for you. Iapetus, my child. Do you see the humans outside? After a thought, the god of speech didn't know what Mother Earth wanted him to do, but he still replied, I see them, Mother Goddess. They gather near the oracle, praying day and night to their creator, but they're also approaching the end of their lives. Perhaps in 500 years, perhaps 1,000, their bodies will return to your embrace, while their souls will move on to the domain of the Lord of the spirit realm. As he spoke, Iapetus' voice slowed down. He probably knew what Gaia was asking him to do. As expected, Mother Earth spoke up next. Adet novel Benedet. Yes, as you see, the life of humans is coming to an end. This is the death determined by fate. Once they vanish, these plains will become empty again. The divine king does not wish to live with his mother, and my second son Pontus, who rules the nearby seas, also hides in the ocean depths under the oppression of his nephew, leaving me here alone. Gaia stepped forward and looked at her child. You should understand what I mean. I need you to go to the spirit realm on my behalf and fetch the water from the well of origins. Tell Laine that as long as he agrees to my terms, our previous grievances will be wiped clean. Iapetus didn't know what grudges Mother Earth held against the Lord of the spirit realm, but he knew that the divine king had expressly forbidden the birth of silver humanity. If he chose to go, then he would never be accepted by the divine king again. Use your godhood of speech. Iapetus, I believe you can do it. As for Cronus, you need not worry about him. Seemingly discerning the god of speech's concerns, Gaia promised him, I swear by the name of the primordial gods, as long as you handle the matters related to creation, henceforth the earth shall protect you. As long as you are on earth, no one shall force you into doing what you do not wish to do, not even I myself. Moreover, consider it carefully, the divine king's daughter has already been born, and destiny has begun to turn. You have seen your father's strength. Do you really think Cronus can defeat destiny? No matter how much had been said before, it couldn't compare to the last sentence. The reason Iapetus had come to see Mother Earth was because deep down he also felt that the divine king might not be reliable. Burdened with prophecies and curses himself, how could he make others believe in him? I will do my best, Mother Goddess, but I cannot guarantee the outcome. With a slight bow, under Gaia's satisfied gaze, Iapetus still gave the answer the other party wanted. Good, you will succeed. After all, the birth of silver humanity is what he has prophesied. Oh, right. As if recalling something, Gaia added a last piece of advice. Creating life is quite complicated, and I think aside from humans, the rest of the living beings could be left to your handiwork. Though she hadn't gotten involved herself, the strange life forms previously fashioned by the gods had left a deep impression on Gaia. On one hand, she did not want the new life forms to be like that, for it would remind her of the titans confined to the abyss by the Heavenly Father for their ugliness. But on the other hand, she did not want to spend her time and effort remodeling them. In such a situation, having someone else take on the task was an ideal thought. Moreover, this repetitive creation is too troublesome. Grant those lives, unlike the gods, the right to reproduce on their own. Understand, he found himself bearing yet another burden. But when one is deeply in debt, they stop worrying about it, and the god of speech resolutely agreed. He had participated in the creation of life once before, and although it had indeed been troublesome, with that experience, he had some confidence. As for reproduction, that wasn't really difficult. What truly decided whether life forms could reproduce on their own was not simply creating females, but bestowing upon them the power related to reproduction. However, on this matter, the god of speech was not worried about being rejected. After all, The increasing number of spiritual lives would inevitably hasten the Lord of the spirit realm's accumulation of divine power. And once life could expand its scale autonomously, it would quickly spread across the earth. Iapetus thought that no one would oppose someone else undertaking work for them. So after accepting the task, he then asked Mother Earth for a branch of the golden apple tree as a gift, and then he directly flew through the pathway Gaia had opened to the underworld below the earth. To other deities, only an extremely few cracks on the earth could connect to the gates of the underworld. But in Mother Earth's hands, every part of the earth could link to the underworld. So, once more, Iapetus missed the chance to encounter the god of west wind circling the Great Plains, and instead arrived directly in front of the familiar Styx River. Having traversed the long fissure, Iapetus once again arrived at the gates of the underworld. Unlike the ever-changing surface world, the underworld often remained unchanged for millennia. But this time, at the gates of the underworld, in addition to the familiar river Styx, Iapetus also saw a lake of fire. It was a part of the sun that had fallen, but after being tainted with the mixed aura of the present and the beyond within the underworld, it could no longer return to the sky. After staring for a while, the god of speech silently warned himself that in chaos, unless you possess the boundless power of the twin gods of the dark night, one's strength does not determine one's fate. His own brother had once been so proud, but now he was locked in his own domain, watching his eldest son drive the divine chariot for his enemies. "Greetings to you, lady." Accustomed to the route, he nodded slightly to the Styx River and then, as before, received no response. The god of speech flew over the increasingly vast gray plains. Just like the humans before him, certain peculiar life forms caught his attention. They were undead, twisted forms of life made of corpses, white bones, or some other things. They exuded a negative aura, naturally despised by any living being. These creatures are becoming more numerous. Even without corpses, they can naturally come into existence due to the unique environment of the underworld. If these living beings, these undead, dared to appear above ground, the gods would certainly have cleansed them. Frowning slightly, Iapetus did not linger and continued flying towards the direction of the nethermoon. After all, the underworld was not his residence. Like the goddess of deceit or the god of destruction, the deities of the underworld were willing to tolerate them, so there was no need for him to meddle. The god of speech looked down upon the land from the sky, while in the underworld, a few of the wiser undead looked up at the sky. They saw a trail of light crossing the sky, and in the burning soul fire, they too harbored disgust and hatred. They knew of these beings, these gods that sometimes came here. These gods from the earth were different from the native deities of the underworld. Sometimes they were just passing by, but other times they would randomly kill any undead they saw. Although they didn't know why, it was clear that these beings did not like them. So the undead also harbored hatred for the earth's gods, just as they hated the living on the earth. Unfortunately, in this era, mortals could not threaten the deities. Regardless of their thoughts, they could not harm the gods in the slightest. Suddenly, the nethermoon was right in front of him. Sensing the increasingly powerful aura of this most central celestial body of the underworld, Iapetus spoke with reverence. "Honor goddess of the nethermoon, master of magic power and wraiths, I am Iapetus. I am here by the command of Mother Earth to meet with the Lord of the spirit realm." The next moment, just as in the past, Liana's figure silently appeared before him. "Come with me," she said. "The Lord wishes to see you." Crossing the invisible portal, the shadowy illusions of 7 realms flashed before his eyes. In an instant, Iapetus felt as though countless lives were speaking in his ear, and an infinite number of lights and shadows flickered by. For a moment, he thought he saw a silver serpent dancing wildly in the sky, darkness and illusion interweaving, a towering figure enveloped in the power of space-time, gripping a fiery orb of light, pressing it fiercely toward the east. But that was just a fleeting glimpse. When Iapetus awoke, he had truly stepped on a Mount Sinai, and everything was back to normal. "What did you see?" Noticing something amiss, Liana asked. Some visions, what do they mean something? Not sure why she was asking. Iapetus still carefully responded. Visions? I'm not sure either. Shaking her head lightly, Liana explained. As the spirit realm grows stronger, time and fate mingle here, and it's possible for those who come here for the first time to unknowingly catch a glimpse of the future. But don't mind it. The fate of the spirit realm is ever uncertain. What you saw may not necessarily come pass. After resolving the other party's confusion, Liana continued to lead them forward. Walking on the stone path, Iapetus realized that he was not headed towards the central hall, but was on a smaller trail leading to the back mountain. Silently following, he soon found his destination. It was the place he had caught a fleeting glimpse of during the creation of humans, the location of the Well of Origins. And there stood the Lord of the Spirit Realm, seemingly deep in thought by the well. My respects to you, Your Highness. Even before he approached, Iapetus slightly bowed, respectfully speaking. He tried to contain his power as much as possible, not to give any impression of misusing his godhood, something he had not intended to do anyway. Good evening, God of Speech. After a short while, as if awakening from his reverie, Laine turned around and greeted him with a smile. Clad in a black robe, for some reason it gave Iapetus a feeling both foreign and familiar. He felt he had seen this material before, but he could not recall where at the moment. I have made many conjectures about the course of fate. After all, I have truly changed it, but not completely. I knew that silver humanity would inevitably be born. But it wasn't until you evaded Zephyrus' surveillance and, transforming into a giant serpent, arrived at Mother Earth's abode that I was sure destiny in this world remained as before. His body somewhat stiff, Iapetus had not expected his every move to be observed by others. The Lord of the Spirit Realm, he could accept, perhaps the focus was really on Mother Earth at Delphi, but the fact that the god of West Wind was just around the Great Plain and he had passed in front of him unnoticed was unsettling. Fortunately, an unexpected thought had stopped Iapetus from going directly there, instead first transforming into a serpent to rush to the human tribes, and thus he also evaded the surveillance of the god of West Wind. I did not know, he said. I just wanted to see the humans near the oracle. So this is destiny. It always fulfills its purpose when you least expect it, in the most unexpected of ways. Shaking his head slightly, when Iapetus went to Mother Earth's abode, Laine truly felt the fluctuation of destiny. It was the curse he had placed on Zephyrus. Because of this, he noticed the two deities near Delphi. But this time, the uncertain fate and the destined one stood on the same side. Both wanted the Silver Age to arrive on schedule. Thus, under the complete force of destiny, everything seemed so inevitable. Tell me about your mission. Did Mother Earth send you to obtain the water of the well, to create new life? Lightly tapping the jade-like well wall and looking at the clear, yet illusory liquid inside the well, Laine spoke. Not fully understanding what Laine referred to as destiny, Iapetus always had a sense of self-awareness. That was a concern for the Divine King, not something relevant to him now. Yes, Your Highness. As you can see, the life of the Golden Age is nearing its end, and the earth will again see the desolation of 10,000 years past. Hence, Mother Earth decided to create life and entrusted me to seek the waters from the Well of Origins. He paused a moment, then continued. Moreover, because creating life over and over is too cumbersome, Mother Earth hopes to allow life forms other than humans the ability to reproduce. When life can continue on its own, the two divine artifacts symbolizing life will also be strengthened once more. Nodding his head, Laine was not at all surprised by this. He too was looking forward to this day. Complete, reproducing life forms. Only with their birth could spirituality advance leaps and bounds in the accumulation of divine power, just like the sun and the ocean. As you wish, you will get what you desire. After all, the birth of new life is beneficial to me as well. Laine nodded. Then go. Create life. This is not an easy task. At it novel Benedat. But with the help of your two children, I think you will do well. Leaving the spirit realm with the special well water and the borrowed divine whip, Iapetus returned to the abode of Mother Earth. Although he had the life of the Golden Age as a template, the god of speech only needed to make repairs on its basis, yet the task was still not an easy one. Therefore, he decisively accepted Laine's suggestion to detour to the underworld and bring over his two children. He had the clever Prometheus assist him in adjusting the shells of life, and the dull-witted Epimetheus help him remember the characteristics and gifts that different lives should have. As he had predicted, both deities performed very well. Over the centuries, horses, jackals, and various kinds of life that would be common in later ages gradually became recognizable, no longer strangely shaped like their distant relatives from the Golden Age. The personalities designated for their ancestors by the gods were also inherited by the Silver Generation. Loyalty, cruelty, docility, cunning. Different natures under the influence of divine power were revealed by the water from the Well of Origins, bestowed upon different creatures. However, to keep it secret, Iapetus only created a pair of each kind of being, and then used divine power to protect them. He planned to use the divine artifact that once created people to transform them into tribes, only after everything was ready, so as not to alert that watcher prematurely. The god of speech was preparing, and during those years, another major event happened again in chaos. 390 years after the birth of Hestia and Demeter, the third daughter of the divine king was born. Under the proclamation of the current laws, all deities came to know her name, Hera, the goddess of fertility. On the day of her birth, the part of Mother Earth related to the original fertility was once again severed. Fertility, this was the reward chaos had given to them when they conceived the Titans together. The paternal authority allowed Uranus to ascend to the throne, and the power over fertility made Gaia the queen of gods, which, although it couldn't enhance the deity themselves like the former, could bring strength to their spouse and offspring. It was the most suitable divine authority for the queen of gods, and thus Hera's birth brought even more attention. However, just like her two sisters, aside from the day when a new god was celebrated, her figure was never seen again. Years passed, one after another. When the queen of gods Rhea was pregnant once again, and the silver beings created by Iapetus were becoming more numerous, time finally came to a certain point. Not by accident, nor affected by wars of the gods, the humans of the Golden Age truly reached the end allowed by fate. Below Mount Otherworld, in front of the temple of Corolla. Which one is this? Another slab was buried in the ground, and Hua asked Cohen. The upper half of the stone slab remained above ground, the lower half driven deep into the earth. When its corresponding human lived out their last moments, another body would be buried in front of the slab. Even when the humans of the Golden Age died, their bodies would not decay for 1,000 years. How many? I can't remember either. As the recorder of history, you should know their number better than anyone. After all, for each person who dies, it is you who engrave their past, allowing them to worship the gods just as they did in life. Seated beside Hua, the king of the golden humanity surveyed the surroundings. Compared to several months earlier, there were far fewer humans around the temple. After all, the golden humanity was a creation of the gods, their lives flung into existence with a single strike of the divine whip. As such, their strength, endurance, and even their lifespans were remarkably similar. When the first human lost their perennial youth and died within just a few days, a great number of humans quickly followed. Half a year later, the tribe of humans beneath Mount of the Gods had already halved. Yet the humans were not afraid of this, not only because they lacked the emotion of fear, but also because they knew that death was merely the beginning of another phase of life. The prescient sage Prometheus once told them that surrounding the sun, among those shining stars, the heroic spirits of the golden humanity lived on. They could continue to serve the gods, even across the vast expanse of the cosmos. Had it novel been at. However, it said that there seems to be little communication between the gods of the stars and those on the Mount of the Gods. Has any deity bestowed a divine message? Continuing to work with a stone knife in hand, Hua casually asked, "Death is not frightening, But the real problem is that once we die, no one will clean the temple, and no one will worship the gods. No. Although Hua didn't look at him, Cohen still shook his head. It was as if he had been forgotten since that being named Hecate left. He had seldom received divine messages from the Divine King. Only occasionally, a deity would pass by. Perhaps the gods do not care. They are indifferent to temples and faith. Somehow, Cohen remembered a dream he once had. In the dream, the goddess refused his offer to build a temple and did not intend to let Cohen pray to her. Over the years, he gradually understood her viewpoint. After all, even the gods on the mountain were more interested in the act of worship itself than anything else. The gods didn't gain anything from the worship of humans. They merely took some pleasure in it. So naturally, when there were other things to do, they would relax their attention to it. True, to eternal deities, humans are indeed insignificant, and even these stone slabs I carve will not last forever. After finishing the last stroke, Hua examined his work for a while, and after confirming there were no errors, he set it aside and picked up a new stone slab. But in a few days, it will probably be just you left. When that time comes, I'll trouble you to carve my life story onto a slab and bury me in the earth, so my past may be with the gods. If I'm fortunate enough to be chosen for the heavens, to keep company with the god of stars, I shall be watching over you, Cohen. I will. Answering softly, Cohen knew what he meant. As one of the first humans, he was the most unique. Compared to others, Cohen could feel that he still had a long life ahead of him. He didn't know when he would die. Maybe in 1,000 years, perhaps in 10,000, but definitely not now. I will guard this place, whether the gods care about us or not. But the reverence humans have for deities will never change. Under the watchful eyes of the stars, I will protect this place until the end of time. Looking at Hua's face, which had also begun to age without him realizing when, for some reason, a strange emotion surged through Cohen's heart. He didn't know what this emotion was, but he had never seen it in other members of the Golden Humanity. He wasn't sure if this was because he was the first human or because of that unforgettable dream, but Cohen instinctively didn't want to face this emotion. So he stood up, greeted Hua, and then walked towards the temple. In this moment, only the gods could give him a moment's peace of mind. In the Second Era, humans were always insignificant. Apart from a few exceptions, no god paid attention to the aging of humans across the lands, perhaps only sparing them a thought in idle moments, before suddenly realizing that they had all died. But once dead, they were forgotten, as the attention of the chaotic gods was now focused on the Divine King, who continuously fathered divine children. He had 3 daughters, each with powerful godhood and extraordinary talents, but their inherent gender meant they could not threaten the throne of the Divine King. However, Cronus would not always sire only daughters. Eventually, he would have a divine son of his own. Around the time the Divine King's 4th child was about to be born on the Delphi Great Plains, within the range of Mother Earth's divine power, silver humanity was being born from the hands of this repeatedly wounded ancient deity. Iapetus watched this scene, with his 2 children and his wife, the goddess of renown, Clymene, present. Having decided to defy the Divine King's orders, he naturally made preparations. Unfortunately, because of this, he had a big argument with his wife. After all, the god of speech had decided to live in seclusion under Mother Earth's protection, while the goddess of renown was clearly not fond of keeping a low profile. Cronus, don't blame me. The arrival of the Silver Age is determined by fate, and I am merely following its will. Clasping the life vase, a deep black mist appeared intermittently. Although she had made up her mind before, Gaia began to hesitate as the moment approached. Because of past events, she indeed harbored many grievances toward Cronus, but he was, after all, the first to stand up, willing to rebel against the Heavenly Father. She was willing to give him some trouble, but she did not really want him to pay too grievous a price. This contradictory psychology was undoubtedly evident in the mythology. On one hand, she guided Zeus to release the Titans trapped in the abyss and forged 3 divine artifacts for the 3 brothers. But after the struggle for the Divine King's throne ended, because of her dissatisfaction with Zeus's harsh treatment of the Titans, she birthed Typhon to oppose the Olympian gods. Throughout the process, Gaia's stance could be described as wavering, never fully resolved. Now that it has come to this, my sister, you wouldn't consider backing out, would you? Do you feel it, the joy from the underworld? Barring any surprises, the divine authority of Cronus's next child will be related to that place. It doesn't really matter to me. Although the underworld is also influenced by my power, that is just an insignificant part. But what about you? You're the earth, will lose a part again, all thanks to your beloved children. The voice of Erebus, the dark overlord, was faint, standing beside Gaia, yet invisible to the observing family of the god of speech. As the embodiment of secrecy, so long as he didn't wish to be perceived, hardly any deity could detect his presence. Even the laws of the current world largely ignored this ancient deity. Adet novel Benedat. I understand, Gaia replied coldly, knowing that Erebus's words made little sense, as the divine king could not determine the godhood of his offspring. But reason is one thing, reality another. Like he said, Mother Earth too felt the tremors from the origin of the underworld. Despite its position as the boundary between this world and the outer realms, the underworld was never entirely under Gaia's control, but it was still a part of her. But soon, this part would also greet a new master. She reached out her hand, merging the faint darkness with the life origin liquid in the vase, tinting the originally verdant liquid with a layer of shadow. Under the power of the earth, the soil and stone necessary for creation surged forth, combining with the life origin liquid. Although she disliked Laine, Gaia had to admit that the humans he had previously created were already quite perfect. Thus, she only made slight adjustments to align them with the slightly altered essence of life. Creation was difficult, but imitation was easy. Thus, just 3 days later, the silver humanity had begun to take shape. Different from golden humanity, due to the infiltration of dark forces, Gaia dared not first create an excellent prototype and then copy it, because only through sufficient dilution could they appear somewhat normal. Therefore, she had to repeat her actions over and over again, even creating hundreds of humans simultaneously. In the end, when she stopped, the densely packed silver humans had already emerged upon the earth. They had not yet been endowed with souls, so their eyes were lifeless, but the breath of life was already manifest on them. However, compared to the Golden Age, for reasons unknown, silver humans were shorter in stature, as if they were children who had not yet grown up. Moreover, even from just watching, the god of speech, Iapetus, could feel indulgence, lust, greed, and deceit emanating from them. It seems that Mother Earth was not in a good mood, and so her sentiments have been transferred into these humans through her divine power, haven't they? But will such humans truly worship the gods devoutly like their predecessors did? The god of speech couldn't help but feel doubtful, but out of respect for Mother Earth's presence, he said nothing. After all, the act of creation was a task entrusted by Mother Earth. Furthermore, thinking of the prophecy, which stated that the appearance of silver humans would lead to wars upon the earth, their various behaviors also seemed to make sense. Iapetus, the rest is up to you. Taking a deep breath, Gaia was also a bit weary. Repeating the same task had left her feeling mentally fatigued, and coupled with the fact that the birth of the silver humans was part of a plot, she did not want to see them anymore. As you wish, Mother Goddess. Bowing slightly, the god of speech stepped forward. He picked up the divine whip, stirred it through the materials prepared in advance, and then gave it a gentle shake. Under the influence of the divine artifact's power, as the materials fell to the ground, millions of different types of animals appeared on the Great Plains, just as it happened during the birth of golden humanity. A mysterious aura emanated from them, landing on the whip, slightly increasing the artifact's power. Putting down the whip, the god of speech then raised the chalice. It was filled with water from the well of origins, which he turned into mist with his divine power, enveloping all the creatures present. After completing this step, Iapetus thought it was all over, but to his surprise, he found that a little water was left over in the chalice. That was because he had taken the water based on the needs of all spirits for propagation, forgetting that humans did not require propagation. So the portion meant for humans was left over. Then let it stay here. Water from the well, once removed from the specially made chalice, would lose its divine effect after 7 days, even if unused. So, Iapetus casually poured the remaining portion onto a rock at his feet, and then observed the changes unfolding across the Delphi Great Plains. Under his gaze, humans and all spirits opened their eyes one by one, and silver life would spread across the earth. Of course, other than him, there was also the god of the west wind, Zephyrus, who had been circling the vicinity of Delphi, witnessing this scene. Atop Mount Otherworld, the divine king's bedchamber. Once again, a divine birth anomaly occurred. Judging by the scale, it was likewise a true god with a strong priesthood. Unlike his own siblings, Cronus could be said to have taken eugenics to an extreme level. However, it was also difficult to say whether this was the influence of fate. After all, it was not uncommon in the chaos world for powerful gods to sire weak offspring. In front of the great hall, compared to the leisure at the birth of his eldest daughter, Cronus's expression was somewhat serious now. Unlike before, this time, he did not know whether the child being born was a boy or a girl. What's more, the most crucial point was that his third daughter, Hera, had obtained a portion of the birthright from Mother Earth, which was simply a natural reserve for the future Queen of Gods. Taking into account that it was entirely normal for siblings among the chaotic gods to come together, Cronus couldn't help but speculate whether this was a heavenly empress prepared for the next generation's divine king. As he pondered, the anomaly around the Mount of the Gods became even more intense. But just as the aura was about to climax, the divine king suddenly looked beyond Mount Otherworld. There, an invisible current of air was rapidly flying towards him. Zephyrus, what is he doing here? Didn't I tell him to watch over Delphi? His expression changed, and just like the previous 2 times, the eyes of all the gods were on the mount. At such a time, for the god of west wind to come so indiscreetly, there must have been a slip at Gaia's end. Stepping forth, Cronus immediately reached the other side, and then forcefully compressed Zephyrus, who had taken the form of a stream of air, back into human shape. Before he could even ask, the god of the west directly delivered the news he least wanted to hear. Your Majesty, I don't know how it happened, but Mother Earth and the god of speech have created a new generation of life on the Delphic Great Plains, and humans are also among them. Boom. Buzz. The divine power inadvertently unleashed by the divine king, along with the sudden buzzing of the law, resonated with each other. As his own offspring was being born, the silver humanity emerged into the world, and Cronus felt that his previous actions were like a clown in the face of fate. Swoosh. The dark ribbons scattered across the sky, and the earth trembled. Shortly after, as a stream of light mingled with the faint breath of the 4 primordial gods crashed into the great hall, the true name of the new god echoed in every corner of the chaos world the next moment. The god of the underworld, Hades, at the same time, perhaps in welcome of its own master, deep below the earth, beside the river of vows, Styx, another river was slowly born, and an aged deity also emerged from it. That was the river of sorrow, Acheron, and Charon the ferryman of the Styx River. At it novel Benedat. It seems that in many mythologies there is such a river that, apart from a designated boat, no substance can float on top of it. They all have a ferryman, and if one is not willing to bribe him, mortals can only sigh in longing at the river's edge. And the painful Acheron is the unfloating river unique to the chaos world. Silver humanity, Mother Earth, I understand. Amid the sky, Cronus seemed to have accepted the fact. He had assigned the god of west wind to monitor Delphi, simply to prevent any deity from stealthily borrowing the life vase. But if it was Mother Earth herself who wanted to create life, then unless he went there personally, no one could keep an eye on her. But since previously Gaia had sent someone to bring him a golden apple, Cronus had thought she wouldn't do such a thing. But in the end, she disappointed him nonetheless. Is this fate? But I do not believe in it. The voice was very calm, but Zephyrus's body began to tremble involuntarily. His instincts told him that the divine king seemed about to make a terrible decision. "You can leave now. My firstborn has already come into the world. Now I must visit him." No longer paying attention to the god of the west wind, the divine king turned and walked into the central bedchamber of Mount of the Gods. Without pausing, he reached out and grasped, and from the crack between spaces, 3 golden ambers slowly floated out, the very same daughters he had earlier. Even sealed, they never stopped drawing power from their godhood, resisting Cronus's divine power. The divine king had no doubt that if he were to release the restrictions now, they could all grow to the appearance of an 8 or 9-year-old in an instant. But all of that ended here. "Cronus, what are you going to do?" Watching her husband push open the doors, with his 3 daughters from before floating beside him, Rhea lay on the bed, her face slightly pale and with some panic. Having been together for 10,000 years, she could sense the turbulent emotions beneath the divine king's calm exterior. Moreover, this time, her child was ultimately a divine child. "Nothing, Rhea. I won't do to you what Father God did to Mother Earth, I promise." Approaching the bed, he whispered softly. Cronus sat on the bed's edge, looking at the newborn infant. It was as though he was talking to Rhea and also to himself, but it also seemed like he was conversing with something unseen. "And I don't know why. My children all, to a greater or lesser extent, split Mother Earth's power, so it makes sense for her to make such a choice. Yes, it makes sense. Destiny is such. It makes everything so rational, as if it had done nothing at all." With a sneer, Cronus snatched the infant from Rhea's hands. He looked at it, just as he once held a sickle, looking at his own father. "I want to see what other tricks you can come up with." Boom! A silent resonance echoed in the primordial sea, but the laws of the present world did not take any further action. Unlike the Heavenly Father, Cronus's actions, in a strict sense, were not against the rules. To stuff gods back into the womb is a violent act that defies the law of birth. But to swallow gods into one's belly is simply a special way of sealing gods. They will thus be cut off from most connections with their godhood, but they will still exist in the present world. Leveraging the connection between their bloodlines, the divine king could even expend more than 10 times his divine power to fulfill their godhood duties in their stead. And unlike the goddesses, infant gods cannot draw power from within a male god's body to continue growing. They can only rely on their own severed godhood, allowing their divine power to grow slowly, bit by bit. At the same time, outside Mount of the Gods, amidst the turmoil of the primordial sea, all deities with intermediate divine power or higher knew what had happened. One god had swallowed another, using his power to suppress the other's growth and divine authority. They were shocked by Cronus's ruthlessness and decisiveness, and for a time, the chaos world fell silent. Only Queen of Gods Rhea, she watched in agony as her husband swallowed each of the 4 children, and even after that, he could still smile at her. For the first time, she felt a sense of strangeness. Golden apple, Mother Earth. As another child was conceived within her, Rhea took out the gift Gaia had once given her. If fate has decreed that the divine king must be succeeded, then let it come sooner. At least in this way, the world may see fewer conflicts arising from it. Thousands of years ago, within the underworld, 12 titans together in the womb of Mother Earth witnessed the prophecy that would decide the succession of the divine king. But in the end, driven by a sentient life's curiosity about the future, Cronus, like his own father, inquired about his fate. Therefore, Laine told him that as life and death exchanged places, he would lose what he had gained in the same way he acquired it. The world is like a circle, and this was the ending destined for him. In the past, Rhea did not understand what this meant, but now she did. She had mastered the method of turning death into life, but she still needed one thing to help her turn life into death. But this was not difficult because her eldest son, Hades, who wielded divine authority over the underworld, was born from the intertwined powers of the 4 primordial gods. So naturally, his divine power also possessed some of their characteristics. As comprehensive as the earth and abyss, as concealed as eternal night and darkness. Although possessing only some of their characteristics, it was barely enough to cloak the faint aura of a newly born deity. Using this divine power to weave a cloth, to protect the brother with the strength of the elder. The premise was that the Divine King would not investigate seriously, but Rhea was willing to bet on it. She believed that fate would be on her side. So she summoned the Melii, the three oak sisters who served her, deities born from the divine blood of Uranus. Rhea commanded them to find an object sturdy enough, as mortal things could hardly last long under the power of the Divine King. In the end, after decades of searching, they brought back to the Queen of Gods a rock from the molten lava. When the stars fell, some of the sun's power also fell to the mortal realm. And the fact that this rock remained intact within the lava evolving under the great sun proved its toughness. Therefore, Rhea placed this rock under her bed, day and night polishing it with divine power. She was ready, waiting for the right moment, for the birth of the new divine child. It would play a crucial role in helping her child escape his mad father. Since the Divine King began swallowing his children, the chaos world had become quiet and eerie. At first, many deities eagerly anticipated whether this mad act would bring about the world's punishment, but centuries passed and nothing happened. At it novel Benedette. It was not until the birth of the Divine King's fifth son, Poseidon, who wielded control over tsunamis, storms, and earthquakes on Mount Otherworld, and Cronus swallowed him without hesitation, that the gods began to believe that perhaps the Divine King had truly avoided his destined fate with this method. Not just them, even Cronus himself thought so. Since the destined fate had been postponed, he once again turned his attention to the earth and the ocean, which would help his power advance further. So, 300 years after the birth of Poseidon, the Divine King set foot alone in the ocean. He stepped onto the circumterrestrial river, confronting the ocean deity, Sovereign, and his wife, the primordial water goddess Thetis, with unsurpassed strength. Even though Oceanus's power had approached the pinnacle of great divine power after acquiring vast, unclaimed ocean territories, and even though his and his wife's powers would be greater upon the sea, they were still at a disadvantage before the current Divine King. After a decade of divine war, the Divine King finally trampled the ocean beneath his feet, once more asserting his supreme authority. Oceanus was defeated, but unlike the god of sun, being in the ocean, Cronus could not truly harm him, as the ocean was ultimately not the main stage of the Divine King. In the end, the ocean deity Sovereign offered his scepter to Cronus, allowing it to become a part of the Divine King's scepter, and the Divine King also recognized his dominion over the ocean. The submission of the ocean once again elevated the Divine King's power. Looking around, in the chaos world, there were hardly any deities who dared to openly challenge Cronus's reign. Without surprises, Mother Earth and the mountain god would be his next opponents, as the previously obtained 1/3 of the earth no longer satisfied the Divine King's appetite. However, as Rhea became pregnant again, the Divine King still returned to Mount of the Gods first. Though on the surface it seemed fate could no longer stop him, Uranus had thought the same when he once shoved the Titan gods into the womb of Mother Earth. Therefore, Cronus was not careless. He had to make sure that every child of his could not escape his control, and he would never give them a chance to conspire with outsiders, even if this outsider was their mother. Boom! Dark clouds gathered, thunder roared, and lightning flashed as rain poured down from the heavens. Standing atop Mount of the Gods, the torrential rain beat against his body. The Divine King did not use his divine power to dispel the drops, but let the rain slide off his body. In Chaos World, rain and wind were common, but on Mount Otherworld, such a natural phenomenon had never happened before. Cronus could feel that it was caused by the debut of the new god. Undoubtedly, another of his children had a domain related to meteorology, and their godhood was immensely powerful. Don't worry, Cryas. Just like Poseidon, he won't have the chance to shake your control over meteorology. Gazing at the changes in the sky, Cronus casually reassured the god of meteorology by his side. The Divine King couldn't help but feel reflective, as among his several children, except for his eldest daughter Hestia, all of them extended and plundered already existing domains of godhood. This gave the divine king a premonition that perhaps the natural divine domains in the world had gradually been allocated. The deities that were born later would increasingly tend towards perfecting old concepts, rather than pioneering new ones. Even perhaps one day, the descendants of gods might not necessarily be deities themselves. Boom! Silver and purple light streaked across the clouds, emitting a deafening rumble. It was part of the weather, yet it seemed to be more than that. It contained the scent of destruction, as well as teeming vitality. Although not yet born, Cronus could already tell that the new god's domain was capable of sustaining divine power of level 19 or above, and it might even be higher. This speculation inevitably made him wonder if this child could be the one prophesied to overthrow him. But then again, no matter how powerful the domain, he alone could never be my match even at his peak. Moreover, he won't have the chance to grow. Ah, fate, is it? Let's see how you plan to help him overthrow me from within my own belly. Watching the silver serpent flash across the sky with a cold smile, the intangible aura grew increasingly turbulent. Through the thick clouds, Cronus could feel that the sun and moon had cycled 3 times, and the phenomena finally reached its peak. In a moment, accompanied by another loud crash, the true name of the new god spread across the world. The king of the 1,000 thunders, Zeus. Outside, the true names of the new gods had already spread throughout the world, but within the great hall, a tense operation was still underway. Queen of gods Rhea clutched her newly born child to her chest and anxiously looked towards the maid who had been waiting for a long time. "Hurry, quickly, bring it to me." Pale-faced, but with an air of urgency, the queen received the rock from the hands of the goddesses of the white oak. She had once thought of giving birth outside of the Mount of the Gods, but Cronus clearly hadn't given her that opportunity. Fortunately, given that it was within her own domain, the divine king courteously waited outside the great hall. But as soon as the divine child was born, Rhea knew he would enter immediately. "Your Highness." The goddesses of the white oak brought out the stone that had been prepared in advance, and Rhea snatched it from her. She used divine power to alter the rock's shape, making it resemble the infant in her arms. But this alone was not enough. Rhea needed to imbue it with life and the scent of the new deity. So she closed her eyes and cruelly cut open the chest of the infant in her hands. The newborn deity wailed loudly, causing the thunder outside to grow even more frenzied, but Rhea didn't have the luxury of feeling heartache. She hurriedly dripped the blood from the infant's chest onto the golden apple, then covered him with a gray cloth. "Take him away," she said, "to the ocean, to the domain of my eldest brother Oceanus." Apart from the wavering mother goddess, he is the only one in the world willing to confront the divine king now. Tell him, Cronus's pursuit of divine authority will not end here. If he still wishes to keep control of the ocean, if he wants to seize more power from the new king, this is his best opportunity. Watching the goddesses of the white oak nod in agreement, Rhea finally looked at the infant in her hands. She felt reluctant, but still handed him over to her maid. She hadn't done this when Poseidon was born because his godhood was associated with the ocean. Storms, tsunamis would make the god of the ocean reject him. Earthquakes would make the mountain god and Mother Earth despise him. But Zeus was different. His godhood was powerful and only conflicted with the role of the god of meteorology, Crius, the helper of the divine king. Even if just as a backup, the oceanic godline would surely accept him. "Go quickly, as you command, your highness." Bowing slightly, the goddesses of the white oak took the infant and hurriedly left. As Rhea watched her leave, she did not stop what she was doing. The divine king had entered the palace, his unmistakable footsteps approaching. "Destiny is on my side. I will succeed." Mumbling to herself, Rhea fused the golden apple with the stone in front of her. The divine fruit merged into it, becoming the heart of the rock baby, emitting a strong, rhythmic beating. The rock, unfazed by the burning of the sun and cleansed by the power of the queen of God's day and night, had already developed divine power. with the divine blood of Zeus' golden apple fused into it. It seemed to come to life, emanating an aura that belonged to a deity. Tread, tread. The footsteps of the divine king were getting closer, and without further thought, Rhea wrapped the prepared swaddling clothes around the rock, covering it with cloth. She held this infant in her arms, then closed her eyes, waiting for fate's verdict. Tread. The footsteps stopped in front of her bed. Cronus looked at his wife before him. She held the infant in her arms, turning her back on him as if guarding against an enemy. Adet Novel Benedat. The divine king felt a pang of sadness and regret. As his queen of gods, Rhea ultimately could not understand him. She had no idea that every time Cronus saw his own offspring, the final curse of the Heavenly Father echoed in his ears. He is waiting for me, watching from the sky. At the highest place, he awaits my fall to the very bottom. Memories flickered through his mind. The divine king shook his head gently, as if trying to throw these thoughts from his head. If possible, he too did not wish to do this, but fate was so merciless. Should he conquer destiny, the divine king swore, the law of the present world would be his next target for revenge. No one can manipulate the destiny of a king, not even the world itself. What was Mealy here for? Standing in front of the bed, the divine king inquired. On Mount of the Gods, he could naturally sense the presence of the goddesses of the White Oak. He was curious about what she had done as she had hurriedly left just before. However, Rhea, lying on her side, remained silent in the face of the divine king's question. All right, since you don't want to talk, let her be then. Shaking his head, Cronus knew that Rhea was not inclined to pay him any attention at the moment. But as long as their child was still here, he didn't care what petty schemes they were playing behind his back. If she could incite one of his brothers to rebel against him, that would just give him an excuse to take action. The Queen of Gods remained silent, but Cronus was not about to wait any longer. He snatched the swaddled infant from Rhea's arms and swallowed it in one gulp. Boom! A thunderous sound of thunder rolled through heaven and earth. The divine king felt something stir in the void, as if signifying something. Perhaps this child is indeed the one destined by fate, for destiny to respond in such a way. He scoffed coldly. Whether it was true or not, the divine king no longer cared. He took one last look at his wife, and then quietly left the room. He needed to give her some time to calm down, as he still took care of Rhea's feelings on issues other than those related to their progeny. Stepping out of the great hall, he watched the figure of the goddesses of the White Oak transforming into divine light and receding into the distance. Cronus did nothing, for the robust vitality in his belly seemed to prove the vigor and robustness of the new deities, though it could also possibly be the inherent vitality that came with the scepter of thunder. But that was not important. After all, she was now swallowed by him, never to rise again. Walking slowly forward, the god of meteorology was still waiting at the side. His complexion was not good. Birthing two true gods associated with his godhood in succession inevitably affected his divine authority. Fortunately, both new deities expanded the authority over meteorology rather than seizing the existing parts. What he truly lost was only a little bit related to the storm. Cryas, when do you think I should make a move against my uncle who rules over the mountains? Standing shoulder to shoulder with his brother, the divine king asked softly. However, the god of meteorology did not respond, knowing that Cronus wasn't really asking him. Indeed, after a short while, the divine king answered his own question. Let be 1,000 years, no, 1,500 years. Although my divine authority tells me that I will not have any new divine children born in the short term, I still have to wait. By the way, I'd like to see what kind of punishment fate will give me for opposing it so brazenly. Making decisions as if no one else mattered, Cronus looked up at the sky. The dark clouds had not yet dispersed, with lightning weaving through them. The anomaly of the law that appeared due to the birth of a deity was slowly receding, but it still needed a little more time. But Cronus could not wait any longer. If he wanted to see the sun, then the sun had to show itself to him. Gripping the scepter of divine authority, the divine king raised it high towards the sky. Supreme divine power connected heaven and earth, tearing through the yet unquiet law. In that moment, with Mount of the Gods as the epicenter, the entire world felt an extraordinary power erupt from the heart of the earth. The sun was frightened off its course, and all spirits lay prostrated on the ground, worshipping the ruler of heaven and earth. The dark clouds scattered, and bathed in sunlight, the divine king surveyed his surroundings. Unlike before, this time, no deity's gaze dared to pry into Mount of the Gods, spanning the earth, sweeping over vast oceans. Shortly after setting off, the goddess of the white oak felt the terrifying presence emanating from the Mount of the Gods behind her. With the perfection of laws, the thriving of life, and the expansion of the world's surface area, the ceiling of the divine authority also continued to rise. Perhaps in tens of thousands of years, the full power of the divine king would be equivalent to the great divine power in terms of divine energy. But the oak goddess did not look back. Having accepted the command of the Queen of Gods, she would persist, for the presence of the divine king was strong but not enough to instill fear in her. Finally, after several more days of flying over the outer sea, the oak goddess came close to the edge of the world. Upon the turbulent circumterrestrial river, the Melee, holding Zeus, saw the god of the ocean and his wife. It seemed they had been waiting for a long time. After all, the oak goddess had no intention of concealing her tracks over the ocean. Oceanus stood there, his towering stature exuding an intangible oppression that combined with the environment to appear especially majestic. The circumterrestrial river, looping with neither beginning nor end, encircles the chaos world, an endless long river. Its interior connects to the outer sea, while on the outside lies void and chaos. It is like a ring of light, coiling around the outer edge of the chaos world. As the true first of the Titans, Oceanus was different from his younger brothers and sisters. To a certain extent, he possessed the characteristics of the primordial deities, which were reflected in the circumterrestrial river. However, under his gaze, the goddess of the white oak was not afraid. "Your Highnesses, I bring him to you by command of the heavenly empress. He is the infant son of the divine king, Zeus, who commands the 1,000 thunders. I am not skilled with words, so I can only relay the exact words of the heavenly empress. The divine king's greed for power is boundless. If you wish to preserve your dominion over the seas, if you wish to draw greater benefits from a new king, then this is your best opportunity." Placing the infant on the ground, the goddess of the white oak felt the oppressive aura of the two deities without a trace of fear. As deities born from the divine blood, left by Uranus in battle, the Melee sisters naturally were warlike and fearless, never bowing down even in the face of an overwhelmingly invincible enemy. This was also the reason why the Queen of Gods, Rhea, trusted them. Their nature ensured that they would not retreat halfway or betray them to the divine king. The new god, yes, is he the son of the divine king that was born not long ago? Although Oceanus had no idea how Rhea managed to whisk Zeus away from Cronus' sight, the fact was laid out before him. The progeny of the god king, a potential threat to his throne, undoubtedly stirred Oceanus' heart. Cronus' previous oppression had infuriated him, but being weaker left him no choice. However, the infant before him undeniably represented another option. Had it novel been at, but at the moment of decision, he hesitated, because the god of the ocean did not know whether this deity before him was truly the one from the prophecy. After all, in the distant past, Oceanus himself was once suspected of being the one to overthrow Uranus. If it were so, then the ocean deity sovereign was willing to wager on it, or rather, to follow the guidance of fate, joining the side destined for victory. But if not, all his actions would merely hand Cronus further excuse to act against him. After all, while the current divine king still lacked the power to suppress him, it did not mean he would be unable in the future. I think perhaps we need not decide just now. To the side, seemingly perceiving her husband's indecision, the ocean goddess Tethys reached out her hand, pointing towards the boundless outer sea. She knew that her husband, like herself, prefer to deal with problems through indirect means. Thus, they spread water systems across the land with a multitude of oceanides and drew many deities to their side through marital alliances. The matter of Zeus before them could be approached in the same way. They did not need to go all out, just providing the initial, most crucial investment was enough. Raised amongst us does not mean we are complicit. We can give him an environment to grow up in, an excellent assistant, but unless he can prove his prowess, we needn't do more. What do you think? Ultimately, Theseus still left the decision to her husband, as she had always done in the past. To some extent, the original Titans, both male and female, seemed to possess excellent qualities that far surpassed those of the later Olympian gods, at least in the eyes of humans. You're right, Theseus. Nodding slightly, the ocean deity sovereign accepted this point of view. He looked toward the goddess of the white oak before him, his resonant voice echoing above the circumterrestrial river. Melie, my sister in name, servant to the queen of gods, I will leave the child here, but whether he can become the new king foretold by the prophecy is now his own affair. Convey this to your mistress. Zeus will grow up safely over the sea. But to prevent my brother from overthinking, I won't let you stay here any longer than necessary. Melie nodded. She placed Zeus on the ground, then turned and left. Watching her departing figure, the two principal deities of the ocean exchanged glances and once again turned their attention to the infant on the ground. His wound on the chest had not fully healed, and a silver light flashed there. The two deities pondered for a moment, and finally, Theseus put forth another suggestion. Let's send him to Crete Island, a small island near the inland sea. Golden humanity once lived there, and, although they are now gone, the place is well suited for young deities to grow up. Do we need to send someone to take care of him? With some hesitation, the ocean deity sovereign inquired. Without adequate nourishment, his growth will surely be slowed. And without life to teach him wisdom, he might well become arrogant and ignorant. We need not worry about that, Oceanus, for there is an excellent choice there. Shaking her head, Theseus extended her hand. Water floated up at her gesture, turning into a mirror before the two Titan sovereigns, within which the image of a small island appeared. This is Crete. When golden humanity was still there, our daughter of wisdom, Métis, often visited. Her divine power affected some living beings, awakening wisdom within them. To this day, one still resides there who will rear Zeus. As for what comes after, let the child decide for himself. If he truly is the one destined, I believe he will meet us again by his own strength. Theseus was reasonable, so the ocean deity sovereign agreed without hesitation. He waved his hand gently, and divine power enveloped the infant, sending him directly plummeting toward Crete Island. The legacy of golden humanity still existed there, and due to shifts in the world situation, no sea god had planned to bring the newly created silver humanity there. On this island, only a goat named Amalthea was still active, a life influenced by the divine power of Métis. Thus, Zeus was wrapped in divine power and traveled through the sky for 3 days and nights. Finally, at dawn, he precisely landed on the branch in front of this wise being. Take care of him as you would yourself, mortal Amalthea. This is the responsibility given to you by the master of the sea. Help him grow and teach him wisdom. On the day he comes of age, whether alive or dead, you will share in the utmost glory with him. The voice of the sea god reverberated over the island, and an invisible force enveloped this remote island in the outer sea. Everything was thus settled. The wheel of fate slowly turned on its track, and just as the Titans had once returned to the earth, so too did Zeus welcome his new beginning. No one knew what his future would hold, nor did later records provide a precise description of the fate of this third-generation divine king. Everything abruptly stopped there. Perhaps it would be better, perhaps worse, but that was all a matter of the future. In any case, on the island of Crete, the young Zeus grew up day by day. Crete Island, an inconspicuous part of the ocean, was destined to be renowned for generations in the epics of later ages. Zeus, still an infant, was thrown here but he didn't fall to the ground. Instead, he and his swaddling clothes were hung among the branches. This place was neither heaven, nor earth, nor sea, so the authority of the divine king could not warn its master or allow him to sense his own bloodline. On this isolated island, the young Zeus spent his most vulnerable time. When the infant cried, thunder would sound to cover his voice. When the infant was hungry, goat Amalthea would feed him her milk, allowing him to draw from the strength left by the goddess of wisdom. This tiny island was protected by the power of the god of the ocean, and sea monsters could not approach here, nor could birds, and no one could discover Zeus, who grew up on the island. Had it novel been at it. And so, time passed day by day, and decades flew by in an instant. Although he had not yet fully mastered the power befitting a deity, Zeus had grown to adulthood in appearance. He had shoulder-length hair that shone like gold. His tall and valiant stature, coupled with his dark eyes, made it hard for any living being not to describe him as handsome. But on this day, goat Amalthea, who had raised Zeus, reached the end of her life. She possessed wisdom due to the unintentionally leftover divine power of Métis, yet she was not endowed with divinity. Perhaps it was fated, as she lay down on the ground on the 5th day after Zeus became an adult, facing the end of her own life. Thus, before her death, she told Zeus that it was the couple Oceanus and Theseus who ruled the oceans who brought him here. She also shared the importance of wisdom with Zeus and her view of her previous ignorant life after she had gained wisdom. Power can accomplish many things, Zeus, but so can wisdom, which is the last thing I can teach you. I am grateful to Goddess Métis for helping me understand the meaning of life. If possible, please peel off my skin and offer it as a gift to the goddess. As for my horn, please cut it off as well and keep it by your side. With it, it's as if I am still beside you. I will, Amalthea, I will always remember you. Kneeling before goat Amalthea, Zeus solemnly promised, "Your horn will become my most treasured possession. Just as you provided me with milk, it will bring abundance and wealth to all life." The goat died, and Zeus, honoring his promise, peeled off the goat skin and tied the horn around his waist. He infused the horn with the divine power of thunder so that the aspect of life could be activated. From then on, this horn could endlessly produce food. Having organized his belongings, Zeus surveyed the place where he had grown up. From the stories told by the goat, Zeus learned about the world and the gods. He knew that he was a member of the deity race, born with the ability to command wind and thunder, yet for some reason, he found himself here alone. Amalthea told me that I was brought here by the god and goddess of the ocean, Oceanus and Theseus. Since they placed me here, they must know my origins. Although I do not know where they are, their daughter must know. Goddess Métis of the Oceanides, the one who granted Amalthea wisdom. As long as I can find her, I think all my questions will be answered. Having made his decision, Zeus resolved to leave the island. The young deity was confident and brave, resolved to uncover his origins, so he flew into the sky, heading westward from the island. Amalthea had told him that the golden humanity had once lived on this island, and over the years, Zeus had also come across traces they left behind. These were life forms similar to the gods, but without divine power. Thousands of years ago, when humans had not yet perished, the goddess of wisdom, Métis, taught them hydrology and imparted knowledge to them on this island and lived among them. That is how Amalthea came into contact with the goddess's divine power. In her recollections, every time Métis came to Crete, it was from the west. And when she left, she also headed towards the west. So, without knowing where to find her, Zeus decided to go westward, asking every living being he met about Métis. The young deity set off, but in places unknown to him, the moment he stepped off the island, not only one being turned their gaze upon him. The actions of the goddesses of the white oak could be concealed from the uninquiring divine king, but not from several other deities. Or rather, Rhea did not expect her maid to be able to conceal from them. She had anticipated the Mother Earth, but had not expected another primordial god to also cast their gaze upon this event. On Earth, Uriah, the god of the mountains, stood beside Mother Earth, gazing in the direction of the East Sea, feeling the pressure of the divine king drawing ever nearer. Although he did not know when Cronus would make his move against him, that did not prevent him from secretly praying that fate would soon mete out its punishment. And Gaia, she did not care about the throne of the divine king. She was just looking forward to a deity who could open the abyss. Even in her heart, she actually did not wish to overthrow her youngest son. She just wanted him to suffer a bit more, to learn how to respect his mother goddess. Besides, in the underworld, the Lord of Darkness Erebus, who was indifferent to the affairs of the world, was also paying attention to Zeus. The power that Cronus had unleashed earlier was indeed mighty, but it was not enough to warrant his concern. However, the outbreak of the divine war meant that a vast number of creatures on Earth would die. He had long been anticipating the souls of the silver humanity to enter the spirit realm. Apart from the two primordial gods, the couple from the god of the ocean, entrusted by Rhea with the care of Zeus, had also noticed that Zeus had left Crete Island and were preparing to search for their daughter. The opinions of the two Titan principal gods were divided, but they eventually chose to turn a blind eye. They were waiting for Zeus to show his strength. If he could make Cronus fail just once with his meager power, then they would be willing to believe that Zeus was the new king destined by fate. Meanwhile, in the seventh layer of the spirit realm, Laine, feeling the divine power rising with every second since the coming of the Silver Age, could not help but follow the fluctuations of fate and look toward the small island in the eastern sea of chaos. There were some differences from the mythology recorded, but Laine was not surprised by this. Subsequent records often contradicted each other, and his influence on fate could also potentially affect some minor details. There are some differences, but not many. Indeed, as long as I do not directly intervene with my current influence on fate, it is not enough to shake the destined trajectory of the changing of the divine king. However, is his heading in that direction a coincidence? Gently tapping the armrest of his chair, Laine did not sense the trace of fate. He elevated his perspective, and when he looked down at the East Sea from above, he could clearly see that on Zeus's journey to find Métis, two other goddesses were also going to have an unexpected encounter with him. In the original trajectory, the three generations of divine kings each had different relationships with them. But now, the outcome may not necessarily be the same. The goddess whom Zeus respects, the wisdom Métis, and the evaded destiny. I see. It is true, in the myths of later generations, she could indeed be seen as a goddess symbolizing uncertain fate. If mere power is not enough to make the divine king bow, then Heracles and she must have their reasons for treating Zeus differently. With a slight smile, it was probably just a coincidence. After all, no matter how it looked, this encounter would likely not be a good one. In the original mythic trajectory, Zeus actually followed the template of an invincible protagonist. Tremendous talent, an extraordinary background, and formidable enemies. First, Zeus won the favor of his wise wife, rescued his siblings, and then, guided by the ancient gods, found the smith who forged divine artifacts, creating powerful equipment for himself. Then, relying on his appearance, eloquence, and strength, he vastly extended his harem, fathering a host of exceptionally gifted children. His only failure was in the battle against Typhon, which lasted just one day. Soon after, Zeus regained his strength and defeated the king of all monsters who dared to challenge him. In short, in his divine life, victory and success always seemed to follow him, as if he rarely encountered failure or frustration. But for some reason, Laine always felt that Zeus in this world might have to change his template. Perhaps the path of being invincible might become one of growing stronger through adversity unless he could change his character, in which case he was likely to suffer quite a bit. However, while regimes may change, nature is hard to shift, and the observing Laine did not hold much hope for that. Ever since Hyperion was sealed within the sun, Helios took his father's place to drive the great orb, and already thousands of years have passed in the blink of an eye. The situation in the starry sky settled down, and many deities governed their own territories. Among these vast and serene celestial regions, it was not as turbulent as it was on Earth. However, unlike other deities in charge of the starry sky, there was one goddess who had always been somewhat inconspicuous and now found herself with abundant leisure time. The moon goddess Laine, Hyperion's eldest daughter and Helios' sister, who once ruled over many realms along the white path of the moon's orbit, was somewhat idle. Since the mother goddess of light, Thea, who had once lived with her father atop the sun, relocated to the moon, naturally, the god of stars within these realms followed the commands of this Titan principal god. As for Selene, nearly 10,000 years had passed since her birth, yet she had not even stepped into the realm of weak divine power. The moon's orbit required no effort from her. After all, as a celestial body, it now paled in comparison to the sun, and even though the godhead didn't quite fit, Thea could drive it with ease. Thus, Selene found herself with spare time, often wandering between the sky and the ocean. The earth was out of bounds for her, given the fearsome divine king residing there. Over the years, she had hoped to find a strong deity to rely on, but upon reflection, such a powerful god probably wouldn't take much interest in a moon goddess who lacked everything. So Selene simply let her mind wander and began to appreciate the beauty of various places. Today was like any other. The morning light shone upon the sea, casting trails of gold. Selene looked up to find her brother driving the sun chariot across the sky, bringing light and hope to all things. Sometimes she couldn't help but wonder if the concept of the moon hadn't been taken by the Lord of the spirit realm, whether she would also be crafting a moon chariot per the divine king's order, dutifully fulfilling her responsibilities every night. Perhaps things are not so bad as they stand. Her mood lifting, Selene had arranged to meet a friend today and did not want to keep her waiting. "Excuse me, beautiful goddess. May I ask, have you heard of the Oceanides, the goddess of wisdom, Métis?" "Ah." The sudden voice startled the moon goddess. She looked in the direction of the sound and saw a blonde, valiant-looking, unfamiliar deity standing not far away. Perhaps she was too engrossed earlier to notice his approach. But now awakened by his voice, the moon goddess took a closer look at this uninvited guest. Even among the gods, this deity's appearance was exceptional. Yet his aura of divine power was quite feeble, hardly any different from her own. And more importantly, the intensity in his gaze as he looked at her made Selene feel a bit frightened. "I know, Métis, daughter of the god of the ocean, renowned as the goddess of wisdom throughout the seas, naturally stays with the other goddesses. She resides in the west. After flying for 3 sunrises and sunsets, when you see an island rich in vegetation, that will be where she is. She lives there with her sister Eurynomé, keeper of the water meadows. Go and seek her out yourself. If there's nothing else, I shall take my leave." With a slight frown, Selene didn't want to linger any longer. This deity, much like herself, may be good-looking but lacked corresponding strength. But unlike her, he did not seem like the type who would keep to himself. As to whether he was a new deity born recently, that was even less likely. Apart from the divine king, there had been no signs of new deities being born over the past millennia. "Well, thank you for your help, stranger goddess. My name is Zeus. Might I have the honor of knowing your name?" Although a bit disappointed by the distant demeanor of the goddess before him, Zeus wasn't yet the ruler who would later ascend to the throne. Lacking the power to do as he pleased, he didn't impose further, but asked politely instead. "My name is Selene, not a deity of the ocean. You needn't wait. What did you say your name was?" Suddenly realizing who he claimed to be, the moon goddess was somewhat disbelieving. The prominence of a god's birth sign was determined by the strength of their godhood, and as the world expanded, many new gods were born unnoticed. However, such was not the case with Zeus. Adet Novel Benedat, the youngest child of the divine king, whose birth was marked by silver serpents stretching across the sky, Selene could not possibly forget his name. There was some panic, and the moon goddess instinctively wanted to flee. She did not know why the divine child, who was supposed to be swallowed by the divine king, appeared here in good condition, but there were definitely secrets she didn't know about. And the years had taught her a lesson. Don't get involved in these things without sufficient strength. With her divine power in motion, Laine transformed into a seagull and swiftly flew towards the direction of the stars. However, her sudden action evidently aroused Zeus's suspicions. "Madam, wait. It seems you are aware of my existence." While asking the question, Zeus also turned into a majestic eagle wreathed with thunder. He flew high, quickly catching up to the moon goddess. "I don't know, and I don't want to know. Please leave me be. I am the daughter of Thea, the mother of light, and now I am returning to the stars." Laine firmly refused, trying to intimidate the other with Thea's name. What she didn't know was that this instead solidified Zeus's determination to stop her. The great name of the Mother of Light he had heard from goat Amalthea, the powerful Titan principal god, an existence treated with respect by the divine king. If he let the goddess before him go, what happened next would be out of Zeus's control. So he sped up. Laine exerted all her strength to fly, but still could not escape Zeus's pursuit. Even the moon's original godhood in mythology was no match for Zeus's thunderbolt, let alone now. Although Laine's divine power was similar to Zeus's, her strength was far less. She was trapped by Zeus in his eagle form above the sea surface. Whenever she tried to fly high, she was driven back by the thunder that struck her. Fortunately, Zeus didn't intend to harm her. He just wanted to know what he wanted from the goddess before him. "I have no intention of hurting you, madam, but I cannot let you leave either. If possible, I'd like to hear about matters concerning myself. Given your reaction earlier, my origins seem to be quite unusual." Despite his advantage, Zeus remained cautious. He surveyed his surroundings while skillfully coaxing with his words. In response, Laine remained silent. She thought of her father, trapped in the sun, who was so powerful yet locked up there, unable to move. And the deity before her was an existence that the divine king absolutely could not tolerate. Anyway, she would not die, and being caught by him was better than being permanently sealed in the moon like her father. Thus, Laine silently stood off against Zeus in the sky. Time ticked by second, and Zeus exhausted all kinds of words, but the moon goddess still didn't respond. Eventually, he grew somewhat impatient. "It seems words cannot sway you, madam. Then I will have to bring you down and take you away with me." Even though he didn't understand why she was so stubborn, Zeus was no longer willing to wait. In the vast ocean, no one would know if their confrontation was noticed by any passing deity. The scepter of thunder was fully activated by Zeus. Although his divine power was not strong since he was newly born, the surrounding thousands of miles were still obscured by dark clouds and lightning. Zeus reverted to human form, holding electric light intermixed with silver and purple in his hand. The dark clouds descended, as if the sky in this area had collapsed. He watched the white gull that Laine had turned into, issuing his final ultimatum. "Madam, I would still be grateful to you if you're willing to tell the truth." But the result still disappointed him. Laine wrapped her wings over her head, using her meager divine power to enshroud herself. Then Zeus extended his hand, and the silver serpent in the sky bore down as well. The thunderbolt fell, striking fiercely towards the lone white gull on the sea surface. With this blow, Zeus had used all his strength. However, just before his eyes, a spherical barrier radiating with rainbow light suddenly appeared out of nowhere, deflecting the plunging thunderbolts to the outside. The next moment, accompanied by a ripple in space, a red figure slowly emerged.